LoveLore Library. Chapter 884. Looking at Yaoji's face, which is as pale as paper, Qin Feng slightly restrained his gaze. He calmly looked at her and asked, "Do you have any problem?" Yaoji was startled. She forced a smile and said, "What problem can I have?" Qin Feng said calmly, "I heard what you said to Mu Lai just now. Mu Lai is right. If you feel uncomfortable, I will report to the princess and let you leave first." Yaoji quickly shook her head, "No need, I'm fine." Qin Feng looked at her seriously, "You'd better think carefully. If you can't bear it and ruin the prince and the princess's relationship." Meeting Qin Feng's calm eyes, Yaoji's heart trembled. She closed her eyes and when she opened them again, she was calm. She nodded, "I know. My son is still in Glass City. I won't do anything to hurt him." That had better be the case. Qin Feng looked at Yaoji deeply and turned to leave. He quickly disappeared from Marquis Muyang's mansion. Not far from Marquis Muyang's mansion, he saw Lin Han dangling from the eaves like a bat and looking at him. Seeing Qin Feng coming over, Lin Han slid down from the eaves. He looked at Qin Feng and shook his head, "Why do you have to do this? You'll only make her hate you if you do this." He specially came to Marquis Muyang's mansion. He thought Qin Feng was going to tell Yaoji his feelings or something. Who knew that it was a series of threats and warnings? Did Qin Feng really like Yaoji? Lin Han was a little confused. Qin Feng said calmly, "The princess is right. It's better to make it clear now than to lose your life in the future." In the end, you still don't believe her? Lin Han raised his eyebrows and asked. Qin Feng tilted his head and thought, "What should I believe? That Yaoji doesn't have the intention to betray Prince Ding Mansion. Now I believe that Yaoji won't betray Prince Ding Mansion. But I don't know if Yaoji still loves Mu Yang. As long as Yaoji still had the slightest feelings for Mu Yang, no one could guarantee what Yaoji would do at that time. Now we just need to ensure that the princess's plan and safety are not messed up." Seeing Qin Feng walk forward without any hesitation, Lin Han shrugged and followed him, asking, "Should we send someone to watch her?" "Mu Lai will keep an eye on her." Qin Feng's voice was heard faintly. Lin Han, who was behind them, sighed. Relationships were really too troublesome. Fortunately, he didn't have any trouble in this regard at the moment. Otherwise, he would die of pain like Qin Feng, Yaoji, or young Master Feng San. It would be better to wait for a few more years before finding a suitable girl to marry. In Marquis Muyang's mansion, Yaoji was alone in her room, lost in thought. Today's matter had given her a great shock. Other than the initial panic, Yaoji gradually understood the meaning of Ding Wang Fei. At the same time, she couldn't help but admire Princess Ding for being able to think of such trivial things. She never thought of betraying Prince Ding Mansion, just like she never thought of getting back together with Mu Yang. But at the same time, she never thought that one day she would want Mu Yang to die. Perhaps the princess didn't want Mu Yang to die. But for someone like Mu Yang, there was no difference between destroying Marquis Muyang's mansion and killing him. Princess Ding was very thoughtful, so Yaoji didn't blame her for probing. She even thanked her. If she waited until the last moment to know these things, she really wasn't sure if she could do it. Although it was also difficult and painful now, it gave her enough time to think and make a decision. Although it was painful, it also reduced the possibility of accidents. "Yaoji, I heard that you're not feeling well." Mu Yang's voice came from outside the door. Yaoji quickly restrained her expression and turned to look at the man at the door with a calm expression. He was already over 30 years old, but he had more of a mature man's steady aura compared to when he was young. He was no longer the handsome and gentle young master of the capital, nor the helpless Marquis Shitzi who had to compromise in pain between his lover and his parents. Now he was more powerful and domineering. Yaoji stood up and said with a faint smile, "Nothing, I'm just not in a good mood." Mu Yang looked at her with heartache and an apologetic expression. "Did Madam find trouble with you again?" "I'll tell her later, so she won't bother you anymore." Yaoji smiled slightly, and her lips curved into a mocking smile. She said indifferently, "It's been so many years, what's the use of telling her?" "Yaoji." Mu Yang sighed helplessly and said, "Are you still angry with me? Lai-er is already so old, can't we just live peacefully? I'll give you whatever you want, and no one will bully you and your son anymore." Yaoji's smile was a little bitter. After so many years, she was a little numb to such words. Although she returned to the Marquis Muyang's mansion with ulterior motives, she gradually had to rejoice in this ulterior motive. If she was not saved by Qin Feng and directly taken back to the Marquis Muyang's mansion, if the son left in the mansion was not Mu Lai who was trained by the Prince Ding mansion since childhood, but her own son, with Mu Yang's attitude, would she and her son be able to live until now? Mu Yang loved her very much, but he also loved other things. Even if it was for her and their child, he would not be willing to give up anything, not even a little bit. Even if she was no longer in a position to blame him, she still could not help but feel sad for his attitude, for her child. "Do you still remember the serious illness that Lai had in the autumn 2 years ago?" Yaoji asked faintly. Mu Yang frowned slightly. "Yaoji, what's wrong with you?" Yaoji ignored him and continued, "And last year, he fell off the back of a horse. And this spring, he fell into the lake." Yaoji recounted the various dangers that Mu Lai had encountered in the past few years intermittently. Of course, there were also some things that she had done both openly and secretly. Although Mu Lai wasn't really her son, all that he had suffered was for her child's sake. And what made Yaoji even more disheartened was that Mu Yang had never punished anyone behind the scenes except for killing those servants. "Yaoji, what's wrong with you? Isn't Lai-er all right? Why are you talking about this again today? You know, it's us who are sorry." Before he could finish, Yaoji looked at him coldly and said, "It's not us, it's you. Mu Yang, it's you who are sorry to those women. If I left the Marquis Muyang's mansion and never came back, you wouldn't have to be sorry to anyone. It's you who insisted on quarreling with your parents and taking your anger out on your wife. After a long time, you feel that you are sorry to them. But, even if I am sorry to them, my son is not sorry to them." Yaoji. Mu Yang looked at the cold-faced woman in front of him with some surprise. Since he took Yaoji and Mu Lai back to the Marquis's mansion a few years ago, Yaoji's temperament was different from before. He had always thought that Yaoji still blamed him for making her and the child suffer so much, so he had been taking care of her and accommodating her in every way. But it was not until now that he realized that Yaoji was no longer the Yaoji with bright eyes, sweet smiles, and charming enchanting Yaoji in Qingqing Lane. On her originally beautiful face, there was a coldness and decisiveness that was completely unfamiliar to him. Mu Yang suddenly felt a trace of panic. Could it be that he had never really known Yaoji in the past few years? Chapter 885. Yaoji looked at him indifferently. After a long while, she sighed faintly and said, "Just now, concubine Lu sent a message saying that she seems to be pregnant. You should go and have a look." Mu Yang's expression softened as if he had understood something. Smiling, he hugged Yaoji's thin shoulders and said somewhat awkwardly and complacently, "It's my fault. I shouldn't have kept it from you. But you know, concubine Lu's father." Yaoji lowered her eyes and said lightly, "I know, there are only 2 other girls in the residence besides Lai-er. It's a good thing that concubine Lu has a child." He looked at Yaoji to make sure that her expression was normal and she wasn't angry. Only then did he release her and say, "Then I'll go and have a look first. I'll come over tonight to have dinner with you." Yaoji nodded her head dispiritedly and left. Just as Mu Yang went out, the window beside him moved, and Mu Lai climbed in through the window. Looking at Yaoji, she shook her head and said, "I don't understand why you keep thinking about him. For no reason, you've been given the title of a special favorite. How are the women in this mansion any less than other families? If it weren't for our protection, you wouldn't even know how you died." Yaoji looked at him helplessly and said, "Why don't you open the door? Are you addicted to climbing through the window? You're just a kid, what do you know? There's nothing going on between me and him. It's just that he..." Mu Lai rolled his eyes and climbed into a chair to sit down. He said, "This young master doesn't like to take the ordinary path. I know what you're thinking. Even if you don't have any feelings for him, he's still the father of my younger brother whom I've never met. If the child grows up and finds out that it was you, his mother, who caused his father's death, you won't be able to explain it to the child, right? Can't you just not tell him? There's no such thing as an impenetrable wall in the world, unless he doesn't know about his background for the rest of his life," Yaoji said with some melancholy. Mu Lai said, "I've never seen my parents, but they're still living happily. Also, didn't you say that his adoptive parents treated him very well?" Yaoji silently glanced at Mu Lai. How could a child who had never been a parent understand the feelings of a mother, no matter how smart he was? Mu Lai waved his hand and said, "That's enough. At most, you and Commander Qin can have another child. As for my little brother, I just need to know that he's doing well. It was much better than letting him know his current identity, right? Didn't you say that he is the son of an official now?" He was well aware of how awkward Mu Lai's identity had been for the past few years. Firstly, he was the eldest son and the only son of Marquis Muyang's household. If everything went well, he might inherit the title of Marquis Muyang's mansion in the future. But on the other hand, he was the son of a concubine. His birth mother was once a dancer. Moreover, he was an unmarried child. If it wasn't for the fact that the house of Marquis Muyang never had a male heir, he wouldn't even be listed in the genealogy. This caused him to be ostracized by those of the same age as him. Fortunately, he didn't have to stay here and pretend to be the young master of Marquis Muyang's mansion. Otherwise, after a few more years, even his marriage would be awkward. A real big family would not be willing to marry their first wife's daughter to the son of a dancer. A small family or a concubine's daughter would not be worthy of the identity of the heir of Marquis Muyang's household. If Yaoji's youngest son really grew up in Marquis Muyang's mansion, Mu Lai dared to guarantee that he would not be killed by others. If he was not spoiled by Muyang, he would probably have a twisted personality. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Yaoji glared at him angrily. This child was getting more and more outspoken as he grew up. Mu Lai said with a smile, "Don't be embarrassed. Commander Qin came to see you just now, right?" Yaoji glanced at him indifferently. When Qin Feng was mentioned, Yaoji's expression became even more gloomy. Mu Lai patted her sympathetically and said, "Actually, you were asking for trouble when you came to Marquis Muyang's mansion. If you married Commander Qin directly, even if our prince hates the Mu family, he would not find trouble with his brother for the sake of Princess Consort and Commander Qin." Yaoji smiled bitterly. How could things be as simple as he thought? If it were Princess Ding, she might not care, but Prince Ding would never let the Mu family off so easily. If Prince Ding wanted to kill Marquis Muyang, he could have done it long ago. The reason why he did not do it was because he wanted to torture Marquis Muyang and destroy the Mu family. How could Prince Ding let go of such a pawn like her? In these few years, although Marquis Muyang's mansion was not destroyed, it was not peaceful. Lai, you don't have to worry about me. I know what to do." Yaoji smiled faintly. In this world, no one was more important than her son. Even if she could not be by his side to watch him grow up, she must do her best to let him live a worry-free life. In Prince Li's mansion, Yi Ying walked out of the mansion with two people beside her. But as soon as she walked into the hall, she was stopped. Yi Ying frowned and looked at Dong Fangyu in front of her. She said unhappily, "What are you doing?" Dong Fangyu stared at Yi Ying from head to toe and asked, "Where are you going?" Yi Ying's pretty face darkened. She said unhappily, "What does where I go have to do with you?" Dong Fangyu said indifferently, "Now I have the final say in Prince Li's mansion. No one can go out without my permission." Yi Ying sneered, "Who do you think you are? You are the princess consort and I am also the princess consort. If I want to go out, what can you do? What's more, I have asked the imperial consort dowager. The imperial consort dowager has agreed. What right do you have to disagree?" These days, the direction of Prince Li's mansion had obviously changed. Dong Fangyu, who did not care about anything, suddenly took over many affairs of Prince Li's mansion. She even had the intention of making Consort Xian Zhao a mere figurehead. Consort Xian Zhao did not like Yi Ying. But compared to the overbearing Dong Fangyu, the obedient and harmless Yi Ying was especially cute. So when Yi Ying occasionally asked her for something, Consort Xian Zhao would mostly agree. Dong Fangyu sneered disdainfully, "I said, I have the final say in Prince Li's mansion. Not to mention Consort Xian Zhao, even if the Empress Dowager came personally, it would be useless." It was no wonder that Consort Xian Zhao did not like Dong Fangyu. Compared to Yi Ying, Dong Fangyu was much better than Yi Ying except for her bad reputation. But at the same time, Dong Fangyu's temper was not comparable to Yi Ying's. Maybe she had no interest in Imo Jingli, or maybe she did not care about Imo Jingli at all. When Dong Fangyu talked about Consort Xian Zhao and the Empress Dowager, there was no respect at all. Consort Xian Zhao had been noble all her life. How could she tolerate the rudeness of the younger generation? "I insist on going out." "What can you do?" Yi Ying said harshly. Dong Fangyu raised her eyebrows. She did not expect Yi Ying, who seemed to have no temper these days, to be so tough. Compared to her third sister, Princess Ding, Yili, this Yi Ying was not like a family at all. Dong Fangyu had never cared about her either. Now that she was contradicted by Yi Ying, she was naturally even more unhappy. "Yi Ying, for Princess Ding's sake, I will also give you some face. But you'd better not be shameless." Yi Ying was furious. She did not care about Dong Fangyu and turned to walk out of the door. She did not believe that Dong Fangyu would dare to kill her in Prince Li's mansion. "Catch her," Dong Fangyu said coldly. Chapter 886. A figure in green flashed past, and two men appeared in front of Yi Ying, blocking her way. Dong Fangyu said proudly, "Take this woman back to her courtyard. If she still dares to cause trouble, throw her into the dungeon." "Yes." The two men replied respectfully. "How dare you?" Yi Ying was shocked. These two men were obviously not guards of the Li Palace. Seeing the two men coming forward to grab her, Yi Ying screamed, "Dong Fangyu, you're too much. Your prince will not let you off." Dong Fangyu snorted disdainfully, "Stay at home obediently. If you dare to go out, I'll break your legs. Do you think this is Li City and you still have that Ding Wang Fei Jijia backing you up? How dare you? Prince! Prince, save me!" Yi Ying struggled and screamed. "What's going on?" Mo Jingli came in from outside, looking at the farce in front of him with an unfriendly expression. Seeing Mo Jingli come in, Yi Ying quickly broke free from the people holding her and hid behind Mo Jingli. "Prince! Prince, save me! Dong Fangyu wants to break my legs." Mo Jingli looked at Dong Fangyu unhappily and frowned. "What are you doing now? Don't go overboard." Dong Fangyu frowned as well. "How am I going overboard?" I just asked someone to send her back to her room. What happened in the Li Palace these days could not be hidden from Mo Jingli. Mo Jingli looked at Yi Ying and asked, "What's going on?" Yi Ying didn't expect that Mo Jingli would ask her. She hurriedly seized the opportunity and said, "I told the old concubine that I wanted to go out for a walk. Who knows why she went crazy and stopped me in the hall. She even threatened to throw me into the dungeon and break my legs if I went out again. Prince, how come I didn't know? I, the Li princess consort, can't even go out. If Prince is really tired of Ing, why don't you just divorce me? Why don't you just divorce me? Why do I have to suffer today's humiliation?" After such a long time, Yi Ying finally made some progress. He was very proficient in using the tactic of retreating in order to advance. Although Mo Jingli no longer liked Yi Ying like he used to, she was still a woman who had been with him for more than 10 years. Since he had made a promise to Yi Li, he naturally wouldn't mistreat her. She glanced at Dongfang Yu unhappily and said, "What does Ing want to go out for a walk have to do with you? Imperial Mother has already agreed, so why are you making a fuss?" Dongfang Yu's face darkened as he said, "I don't care. In short, the people of the Li Palace are not allowed to go out without my orders." Mo Jingli's face darkened when he heard that. He said coldly, "Dongfang Yu, don't go overboard. Do I need your permission to go wherever I want to go? I haven't settled the score with you for going against Imperial Mother these few days. Don't fail to appreciate my kindness." Dongfang Yu smiled coldly and said, "That's your Imperial Mother. What does it have to do with me? I don't need to give in to that old woman." Mo Jingli was about to fly into a rage, but he thought of something and finally restrained himself. He glared at Dongfang Yu and said, "You must have a reason for not letting Ing go out, right?" Dongfang Yu choked and said unyieldingly, "I'm happy. If I don't say she's not allowed to go out, then she's not allowed to go out." Crazy woman. Mo Jingli couldn't be bothered with her. He pulled Ying up and walked towards the door. He called for his guards and said, "Send the princess out. I'll see who dares to stop you." No matter how powerful Dongfang Yu was, Mo Jingli was the real master of the regent's residence. In the end, Yi Ying was personally escorted out of the Li Palace by Mo Jingli's guards. In the hall, Mo Jingli unhappily told Dongfang Yu to take care of herself and return to the study without looking back. Dongfang Yu stared gloomily at the empty door and didn't speak for a long time. However, it made the people around her secretly feel a little apprehensive. The people by Dongfang Yu's side now were all former subordinates of Infinite Boundless Mountain. After Infinite Boundless Mountain was destroyed, they naturally followed their young master, Dongfang Yu. Many of them had grown up together with Dongfang Yu in Infinite Boundless Mountain. However, looking at Dongfang Yu's current appearance, they almost couldn't believe that this was the intelligent yet somewhat naive young master of Infinite Boundless Mountain. In the end, they could only assume that the sudden rejection of Infinite Boundless Mountain and the sudden death of Madame had dealt a huge blow to Dongfang Yu, causing her personality to change completely. They could only sigh inwardly. "Princess, that concubine Rong has already left. Should we?" The green-clothed man who had just entered to capture Yi Ying asked in a low voice. Dongfang Yu snorted softly and said, "Forget it. If we go overboard, it would instead arouse Mo Jingli's suspicions. Send people to keep an eye on Yi Ying. If she dares to come into contact with the people of the Prince Ding mansion, kill her." The green-clothed man said doubtfully, "As everyone knows, the relationship between Princess Ding and concubine Rong is not good. Even if the people of the Prince Ding mansion really come to look for young Master Qinchin, I'm afraid they won't look for concubine Rong. Moreover, even Prince Li doesn't know. What can she know?" Dongfang Yu was silent for a moment and said, "That's true. However, it's always good to be careful. The people of the Prince Ding mansion have always been crafty. Yi Ying, that stupid woman, might even help others count the money after being sold. The green-clothed man nodded and said, I understand. I will send people to follow up with concubine Rong. After Yi Ying left the princely mansion, she let Imo Jingli's guards go back. Originally, these guards only wanted to send her out of the mansion so that Dongfang Yu wouldn't make things difficult for her. Naturally, they wouldn't follow her everywhere. Yi Ying casually walked around Nanjing City and then turned to go to a temple in the city that was quite popular with incense. Every month, Yi Ying would come to the temple to pray for her long-lost child. Seeing her arrival, the abbot of the temple hurriedly came out to greet her and invited her into the temple. Yi Ying lit incense as usual and then dismissed the young novice monks who served in the temple. She knelt alone in the temple to pray for her child. In the past 2 years, Yi Ying often came here. The young novice monks in the temple all knew that concubine Li was praying for her son. Although they didn't understand why concubine Li prayed for the living every time when her son was clearly dead, these people also knew what to say and what not to say. Therefore, they didn't care about Yi Ying's behavior. In the quiet temple, Yi Ying knelt on the futon and piously prayed silently in her heart to the Buddha statue above. Until the sound of light footsteps behind her startled her. She turned around and saw a young man in white coming out from the back of the hall. She saw that the young man in white was incomparably handsome. There was a smile on his face that made people not feel disgusted at all. They only felt as if they were bathed in the spring breeze and their hearts were comforted. Yi Ying had seen many handsome men, but she had never seen a man like the one in front of her. It was easy to have a good impression of him. Even young Master Qing Qin, who was like a celestial being turned into a human, had a more unapproachable feeling compared to him. Fourth sister, how are you? The young man in white asked with a smile. Yi Ying was stunned and said with some surprise, Third sister. How did you know? Looking at that handsome face seriously, wasn't it 40 to 50% similar to Yi Li's appearance? It was just that compared to Yi Li's original gentle and graceful manner, he had more of the elegance of a scholarly family. Chapter 887. Yi Li played with the fan in her hand and smiled, Isn't it me? Can't you recognize me, fourth sister? Yi Ying smiled shamefully. Yi Li's appearance was too different from what she remembered. If they were on the street, she might not be able to recognize her even if they met face to face. After that, Yi Ying asked, Why did third sister come to Nanjing personally? She thought it was Yaoji who wanted to see her. She did not expect Yi Li to come personally. Hearing Yi Ying's words, the smile on Yi Li's face faded. She sighed softly and said, Of course something happened. A few days ago, you asked Yaoji to send a secret letter back to Glass City. What did it say? Yi Ying was stunned, What's the problem? Yi Li shook her head and said, It's not your problem. That letter was sent to Big Brother, but now, Big Brother is missing. So I want to know what was written in the letter. Yi Ying was relieved and hurriedly said, After Dongfang Hui died, Mo Jingli went to Dongfang Yu. Now all the remaining forces of the Boundless Mountain are in the hands of Dongfang Yu. Mo Jingli made a deal with Dongfang Yu. Dongfang Yu will help Mo Jingli with all her strength, and Mo Jingli will help Dongfang Yu get young Master Qing Qin. Get? Yi Li frowned. This word made people feel uncomfortable when it was used on Su Qingqin. After thinking for a while, she asked then, Is it possible that Mo Jingli kidnapped Big Brother? Yi Ying thought for a while and finally shook her head, It shouldn't be. Mo Jingli did send people to cross the river, but they came back empty-handed. Mo Jingli was very angry and quarreled with Dongfang Yu. These days, although Dongfang Yu helped Mo Jingli suppress the Empress Dowager, Dongfang Yu was also very arrogant in the residence. She did not even care about the virtuous concubine. Mo Jingli quarreled with her several times because of this, and she did not allow me to go out today. Yili frowned and thought for a long time before asking, what about Dongfang? Did Dongfang leave the manor these days? Yi Ying shook her head. After a while, she came back to her senses. She looked at Yili in surprise and said, you think that Dongfang kidnapped young Master Qingqin? Yili sighed and said, it's just a guess. Yi Ying said, these days, Dongfang did not leave the house. However, she had a lot of subordinates, and there were also quite a few people from Infinite Boundless Mountain in the king's manor these days. Mo Jingli didn't say anything, and no one can do anything about it. Hearing Yi Li's words, Yi Ying couldn't help but be shocked by Dongfang Yu's audacity. Yi Ying admitted that she could never kidnap a man whom she liked but did not like her back. Yi Li played with her fan as she pondered. After a while, he said, after you go back, find a way to let Mo Jingli know that it was Dongfang Yu who kidnapped young Master Qingqin. Yi Ying was startled, and said somewhat blankly, how am I going to tell Mo Jingli? How will he believe me? It had to be said that after these days, Yi Ying was actually somewhat afraid of Dongfang Yu. Especially after Dongfang Hui's death, every time she saw Dongfang Yu, she always gave her a gloomy and terrifying feeling. However, she also understood that she had to do as Yi Li said. Not to mention that she still needed Yi Li's help to find her child. If Yi Li didn't send people to protect her secretly, even if she wasn't killed by Dongfang Yu, she didn't know what kind of life she would have. Just look at how the arrogant Princess Xixia had been suppressed by Dongfang Yu these days. Yi Li thought for a while. It was indeed inappropriate for Yi Ying to say it. Not to mention how she would find out about young Master Qingqin's disappearance. Even Yi Ying's brain wouldn't be able to think of such a complicated matter. The moment she said it, the first person Mo Jingli would suspect would be Yi Ying. After thinking for a while, Yi Li said, how is Princess Xixia now? Yi Ying snorted with some schadenfreude, her life is naturally more difficult than mine. Thinking of how Princess Xixia had suppressed her for so many years without any title or status, and then looking at how Princess Xixia was being punished by Dongfang Yu, Yi Ying couldn't help but feel happy from the bottom of her heart. Yi Li's expression was indifferent, but Mo Jingli still dotes on her more, right? No matter how she felt about Princess Xixia, at least compared to Yi Ying, Princess Xixia was better at pleasing men. Looking at Yi Ying's gloating and jealous expression, she knew that Princess Xixia had not completely fallen out of favor. And with Dongfang Yu around, even if Princess Xixia completely fell out of favor, she wouldn't care. Dongfang Yu might be very powerful, but she was too easy to be hated by men like Mo Jingli. Yi Li was sure that if Dongfang Yu punished Princess Xixia, Mo Jingli would dote on her more. You can find a way to let Princess Xixia know about this. When the time comes, she will definitely be happy to analyze it for Mo Jingli. But be careful, don't let her suspect you. Yi Li instructed. Yi Ying thought for a moment. Because Dongfang Yu controlled the Li Palace, many of the people in the Prince Ding mansion could no longer be used. But Yi Li's instructions were not too difficult, so she nodded and agreed. Yi Li saw that she was looking at her hesitantly, and thought for a moment before saying, right, there's news about your child. What? Yi Ying's heart trembled, and she looked at Yi Li in shock. Tears of excitement flashed in her eyes, and she didn't care about how they were dressed. She grabbed Yi Li's hand, saying, there's news. Really, he's really still alive. Yi Li nodded calmly. Looking at Yi Ying's agitated state, a trace of pity flashed across her heart. She said softly, there's news. Mo Jingqi didn't kill that child. We'll have more accurate news in a few days. Yi Ying couldn't care less. She nodded repeatedly, saying, I know, I'll wait. Third sister, thank you. I'll do whatever you want me to do, as long as I can see my child. Yi Li sighed softly, saying, I won't ask you to do anything dangerous. Don't worry, after we find Big Brother, I'll take you to see that child." The tears in Yi Ying's eyes finally fell, and she collapsed on the futon, sobbing. Originally, when the child was still alive, although she treated him well, she didn't have any feelings of longing for him. She would even use the child to fight for favor. But when she found out that the child wasn't hers, and that her own son was missing, and that she hadn't even seen him, Ying felt like her heart was being cut by a knife. She only felt that as long as she could find her child, she would do anything, even if it cost her her life. Yili reached out to pat her on the back, saying, "All right, wipe your tears and go back. There are still people watching outside. It's not good to stay for too long." Ying finally stopped crying. She wiped her face and got up to leave. Yili sat in the empty temple hall and raised her head to look at the Buddha statue that was looking at all living beings with a merciful expression. She could not help but smile bitterly. Princess Consort. Shuojing silently appeared in the temple hall, reporting in a low voice, "There are people following Princess Consortly outside. They're from the infinite boundless mountain." Yili nodded, saying, "We'll leave later. Don't worry about them." Chapter 888. Shuojing nodded silently. After a while, Shuojing asked, "Princess wants Imo Jingli and Dongfang Yu to fight each other. Will that work?" Yili sighed, "We have to try whether it works or not. We all think that Dongfang Yu caught Big Brother. But we can't find her if she doesn't move. In that case, it's better to alert her. Mo Jingli is more familiar with Nanjing than we are. If Dongfang Yu really caught Big Brother, I don't believe that she can hide Big Brother too far away from her. Even if it's not in Nanjing, it should be nearby." Shuojing nodded in agreement. This was the only way now. Jiangnan was neither big nor small, and the infinite boundless mountain had been operating for hundreds of years. No one knew where Dongfang Yu would hide young Master Qingqin. "Send someone to keep an eye on the Li Palace. Dongfang Yu won't return and won't see Big Brother." Yili ordered in a low voice. "Yes." Shuojing whispered. Prince Regent's Palace. Dongfang Yu sat alone in the study, staring at the portrait spread out on the desk, lost in thought. Her soft eyes were full of infatuation and resentment. It had to be said that Dongfang Yu's painting skills were very good. The man in the portrait had white clothes and black hair. His expression was indifferent, like an immortal from the 9 heavens. Lifting her hand to touch the handsome face of the man in the portrait, Dongfang Yu's eyes flashed with a happy smile. Bang! The door of the study was kicked open from the outside. Dongfang Yu's eyes were cold. She looked up unhappily at the angry man standing at the door. "What are you doing?" Mo Jingli walked quickly into the study. Seeing the portrait on the desk, he snorted disdainfully. He stepped forward and grabbed Dongfang Yu's clothes. "Bitch! How dare you play I?" Dongfang Yu was startled. She unhappily waved his hand away. "I don't know what you're doing. Mo Jingli, don't think that I'm afraid of you. Believe it or not, I'll kill you now." Mo Jingli smiled contemptuously. "Kill me? Now that the world is so big, with the exception of I, how can there still be a place for your infinite boundless mountain in Jiangnan? Do you think you can walk out of the Li Palace alive after killing I? What's more, now that you have a handsome man in your hands, are you willing to die?" Dongfang Yu's expression changed slightly. "I don't know what you're talking about." Mo Jingli sneered, "You don't know. I sent people to help you catch Su Qingqin, but you still sent people to stop me halfway. This prince has taken the blame for you, but all the benefits have fallen to you alone. At that time, you can just walk away and live a carefree life, leaving I to fight to the death with the Prince Ding mansion. That's a good idea. Dongfang Yu, if you had been so smart when you were in Glass City, how could you have ended up like this? Dongfang Yu's heart skipped a beat, but he said without changing his expression, I don't know where you heard this crazy talk from. What do you mean? You didn't have the ability to catch young Master Qinchin, so I didn't break my promise to you. Don't push your luck. Mo Jingli's expression was distorted, and he grinned, do you think I will still believe you? From today on, you stay in the palace and you're not allowed to go anywhere. You want to put me under house arrest? Dongfang Yu stared at him with a gloomy face. Mo Jingli raised his eyebrows and said, tell me where Su Qinchin is now. He dared to catch Su Qinchin, not to let this woman be infatuated with him. Dongfang Yu was unmoved. I don't know what you're talking about. Mo Jingli didn't care. He pushed Dongfang Yu away, picked up the portrait on the table, and laughed mockingly. You haven't left the palace these days, have you? What, you don't dare to see young Master Qinchin? That's right. Young Master Qinchin is a handsome man, known as the immortal young master. How could he like a withered woman like you? You only dare to hold the portrait and be infatuated with it. Dongfang Yu's expression changed slightly, and she reached out to grab the portrait in Mo Jingli's hand. Mo Jingli, give it back to me. Mo Jingli moved sideways to push her away. Knowing that he was no match for Dongfang Yu, Mo Jingli didn't want to tangle with her. He turned to walk out, and warned, I advise you to stay in the Li Palace obediently, and don't act rashly. Do you think young Master Qinchin knows that you caught him? You don't dare to see him, do you? Ha! Young Master Qinchin is the wisest in the world. How could he not guess? Do you think Su Qinchin would rather die than have a woman like you? If I were young Master Qinchin, I would rather die than have a woman like you. You've tarnished the reputation of the Su family for hundreds of years. Ha! Mo Jingli. Dongfang Yu was furious. She grabbed the inkstone on the table and threw it at Mo Jingli's back. Mo Jingli was already prepared. In a flash, he was already out of the room. The inkstone hit the door of the study with a clang. Staring at the door that was shaking because of her smash, Dongfang Yu's expression was so sinister and twisted that it made people feel cold. After a long time, she gritted her teeth and spat out 2 words, Shi Xia. Chapter 889. In the Li Palace, where Princess Shi Xia lived, Princess Shi Xia was sitting happily on the chaise lounge, dozing off. She had been suppressed by Dongfang Yu these days. Although she had King Li's protection, King Li could not accompany her all the time, let alone punish Dongfang Yu, who held all the power in the boundless mountain. Therefore, she had been very wrong these days. Today, she finally had the chance to complain to Prince Li about her. Compared to Yi Ying, who had long fallen out of favor, she had been favored all these years, although she did not have a real status. Mo Jingli did not hide many things from her, so Princess Shi Xia knew that Mo Jingli had sent people to intercept young Master Qinchin. Although she did not think highly of Mo Jingli's mission this time, she knew how powerful Su Qinchin was. In the end, Mo Jingli's people returned empty-handed. It was not an important matter at first, but when she accidentally overheard the 2 girls talking yesterday, she suddenly had a thought and pushed this matter to Dongfang Yu. As for whether it was true or not, who cared? As long as it made sense, Mo Jingli would believe it. Just by looking at Prince Li's expression when he left her place, and then hurriedly rushed to the study. Early in the morning, he went to Dongfang Yu's place and gave her a fierce scolding. She knew that Prince Li still believed her words. Bitch, you're so relaxed. Dongfang Yu's voice suddenly sounded at the door. The coldness in her voice made Princess Shi Xia shiver. Princess Shi Xia stood up abruptly and glared at Dongfang Yu, who brought people in. What are you doing here? Dongfang Yu stepped into the hall, walked in front of Princess Shi Xia, and looked at her condescendingly. Slap! Just when Princess Xixia was getting impatient and was about to get angry, Dongfang Yu suddenly raised her hand and slapped Princess Xixia's face quickly and hatefully. In fact, when men hit women, they would hold back most of the time. On the contrary, when women hit women, they would often use all their strength. Dongfang Yu was also a martial artist. With this slap, Princess Xixia's face was slapped to one side, and a few red and swollen fingerprints appeared on her white cheeks. A trace of blood flowed from the corner of her lips, and slid down her chest. You! Princess Xixia was stunned by this sudden slap in the face. She did not expect Dongfang Yu to hit her without even saying a word. Princess Xixia held her burning cheek, and her eyes were about to spit fire. Dongfang Yu, how dare you hit me? Dongfang Yu curled his lips in disdain. So what if I hit you? Who do you think you are? You're just a concubine who doesn't even have a status. No, you can't even be considered a concubine. At most, you're just a maidservant. Princess Xixia was originally a princess, Princess Xixia, but Dongfang Yu mocked you. But Dongfang Yu had so rudely mocked her. Princess Xixia was so angry that she laughed. She covered her face and gave Dongfang Yu the same disdainful smile. So what if I have no status? At least Prince Li likes me. Unlike some people, he did not want me even when I offered myself to him, and now he wants to kidnap me. You can't be thinking about men so much that you want to rape young Master Qinchin, right? So it was you who talked nonsense to Mo Jingli. Dongfang Yu gritted her teeth. Princess Xixia said proudly, so what if I said it? If you dare to do it, don't be afraid of others talking about it. You really disgrace us women. If you are afraid that no one wants you, just put up with the dogs around you. Don't lick young Master Qinchin's face. Maybe young Master Qinchin can't stand a woman like you and would rather die. Dongfang Yu spoke without mercy, and Princess Xixia was not polite either. She also mercilessly poked at the other party's sore spot. Dongfang Yu's beautiful face withdrew a trace of a sinister smile, and she looked coldly at Princess Xixia. Mo Jingli likes you. Fine. I will see how much Mo Jingli likes you. Come, drag her out and strip her naked. Dongfang Yu, don't you dare. Princess Xixia's face suddenly changed, and she stared fiercely at Dongfang Yu. The people following Dongfang Yu were also shocked, and looked at her hesitantly. Although they were all Dongfang Yu's people, Prince Li was the master of the regent's residence, and Princess Xixia was Mo Jingli's woman. See if I dare or not. Go quickly. Princess Xixia sneered. Invite Prince Li over, and say that I have something to discuss with him. The subordinate had no choice but to follow the order to invite Mo Jingli. The other two people, one on the left and one on the right, pulled Princess Xixia to the courtyard, and began to pull off her clothes. Princess Xixia was not a weak woman, and with a wave of the long whip in her hand, she began to fight with them. But her martial arts were not enough to protect herself, and she was restrained after a few rounds. Dongfang Yu had already come out, and looked coldly at Princess Xixia who could not move, and sneered. What are you waiting for? Pull off her clothes, and whip her hard for me. Very quickly, Princess Xixia was only left with a thin inner garment. The weather in the south in September and October was not warm, and Princess Xixia, who was wearing a thin inner garment, shivered from the sudden cold. However, this couldn't be compared to the pain of the whip that pierced through the air and struck his body. After the first whip, Princess Xixia could not help but scream, and fell to the ground. After that, the continuous whipping left her with no place to hide. At this time, the woman who was screaming miserably was not the beautiful woman who had wantonly waved the long whip in front of outsiders when she had just arrived in the Chu capital. Dongfang Yu, what are you doing? A roar came from the door of the courtyard, and Imo Jingli hurried over with Yi Ying. Seeing the scene in front of him, he was so angry that his face turned black. He thought that he had been angry with Dong Fangyu in the morning, and Dong Fangyu was venting his anger on Princess Xixia. Of course, this was the truth. But Dong Fangyu did not care at all about Imo Jingli's anger, and smiled provocatively. Didn't you see? What, as the Regent Wang Fei, do I have to ask the prince for permission to discipline a woman who is not even as good as a concubine? Imo Jingli said coldly, I already told you in the morning, you do not need to care about the affairs of the Wang Fu. Imo Jingli had come a moment later, and Princess Xixia had already been whipped 6 or 7 times, and her inner garment was torn. Seeing Imo Jingli, it was like seeing a life-saving straw, and hurriedly threw herself into Imo Jingli's arms. Prince, woo-woo. Prince, you have to uphold justice for Xia, woo-woo. Dong Fangyu is too much. Xia, is in so much pain. Imo Jingli saw that Princess Xixia was covered in wounds, and his expression became even uglier. Yi Ying, who was following beside him, reminded, Prince, call the doctor to take a look at Princess Xixia first. Imo Jingli looked at Yi Ying admiringly, and then turned and ordered, call the doctor. You are not allowed to go. Dong Fangyu's voice sounded from behind. Chapter 890. Impudent. I have the final say in the princely matter. It's not up to you to decide, Imo Jingli said coldly. Dong Fangyu tilted his head, looking at Imo Jingli. Suddenly, he chuckled softly, looking at him with a smile that was not a smile. Prince, although Infinite Boundless Mountain's influence has already been mostly wiped out by the Western Tomb and the Prince Ding Mansion, there is still at least 30% left. Imo Jingli said indifferently, I know. Could it be that you still want to use your Infinite Boundless Mountain's influence to threaten I? If it was before, Imo Jingli might really be afraid. But now, with only 30% of their influence remaining, while it might be able to cause him some trouble, it was still not enough to make him afraid. Dong Fangyu smiled as he glanced at Princess Xixia. Princess Xixia, who was nestled in Imo Jingli's arms, couldn't help but shiver from this glance, the last trace of blood on her face also vanishing. Dong Fangyu laughed, of course not. I just want to tell Prince Li, actually, Infinite Boundless Mountain still has some people in the Prince Ding Mansion. I can give them to the prince. Do you want them? Imo Jingli's pupils shrank, his sharp gaze shooting straight at Dong Fangyu. The Prince Ding Mansion security was notoriously tight. It wasn't that no one had tried to plant spies in the Prince Ding Mansion. But those who did either disappeared very quickly, or were ostracized outside, forever unable to obtain any useful information. Dong Fangyu also didn't mind Imo Jingli's gaze, smiling as he raised his brows. No need to be so surprised. Infinite Boundless Mountain has a foundation of several hundred years after all. They naturally have some secrets that are unknown to others. While they aren't important people, if used well, there will still be unexpected results. Imo Jingli said coldly, what do you want? Dong Fangyu pointed at Princess Xixia, saying, her. I want the prince to hand her over to me to deal with. Imo Jingli wanted to refuse, but when he opened his mouth, he couldn't find the words to say. Princess Xixia grabbed Imo Jingli's clothes in panic. Prince. Brother Jingli, that woman will kill me. Dong Fangyu looked at Imo Jingli mockingly, as if he was certain that Imo Jingli would not refuse. Dong Fangyu took out a piece of paper from his sleeve and said, in order to show my sincerity, Prince, can you take a look at my price and see if it's worth it for you to do this? Imo Jingli took the paper and looked at it with a sullen face, then put it in his sleeve. Princess Xixia's eyes suddenly widened. Brother Imo Jingli. Seeing the sinister smile on Imo Jingli's face, Princess Xixia grabbed onto Imo Jingli's sleeve in horror, as if she didn't believe that Mo Jingli would really hand her over to Dongfang Yu. Dongfang Yu smiled proudly and ordered the people around him, pull her back and continue whipping her. The two men in green looked at each other, then stepped forward to drag Princess Xixia to the center of the courtyard. Princess Xixia knew that if she fell into Dongfang Yu's hands, she would not be able to survive. She could only hold on to Mo Jingli's sleeve tightly and refuse to let go. "Brother Jingli, save me, no. Prince, save me." Mo Jingli looked silently at the woman in front of him, whose face was filled with horror and despair. Princess Xixia had compensated him for 10 years, gave up her status as a princess, and followed him without any title or status. It would be a lie to say that he had no feelings for her. Although he did not love her, their 10-year relationship was not fake. But, in the end, Mo Jingli could only silently pull away Princess Xixia's hand that was grabbing onto his sleeve. Seeing her slender fingers being pulled away bit by bit, the remaining light in Princess Xixia's eyes gradually disappeared. In the end, Princess Xixia was still dragged to the center of the courtyard. The crack of the whip accompanied by the woman's painful screams rang out. Even the people passing by outside the courtyard could not help but tremble in fear. "Ah, save me. Prince, Brother Jingli, don't hurt, ah." Princess Xixia rolled on the ground in pain. After a while, she was beaten until her entire body was covered in blood and she was on the verge of death. "Prince, why, save me, no one can save you." Dongfang Yu sneered. "Didn't you say that your prince likes you? It seems that compared to what I gave him, he likes what I gave him more. His love for you is not even as good as a piece of paper." Hearing Dongfang Yu's unrestrained mockery, Princess Xixia only felt dizzy. Other than the burning pain, the memories of the past 10 years slowly floated to her heart. Meeting Mo Jingli's dark eyes again, Princess Xixia suddenly felt like laughing. Mo Jingli's eyes did not have the slightest bit of emotion or pity. What had she been doing for the past 10 years? Ha. Princess Xixia laughed softly. She suddenly raised her head, but her face was already covered in tears. "Brother Jingli, you're so cruel," slap. Another whip came. Princess Xixia convulsed in pain, but she still could not stop laughing. Woo, royal sister, royal sister. Xia was wrong. Seeing Princess Xixia's miserable state, Yi Ying, who was standing behind Mo Jingli, suddenly felt that even though she was wearing a warm peacock feather cloak, she still felt cold all over. She could not help but take a step back. Looking at the tall and handsome man in front of her, she could not help but want to stay far away from him. Mo Jingli silently looked at Princess Xixia's dying appearance. Finally, his eyes darkened and he turned to leave. Seeing him leave, Yi Ying could not help but want to leave as well. However, she was suddenly afraid of being in the same situation as Mo Jingli. Her legs could not move. She could only stare blankly at the situation in front of her. Seeing Mo Jingli leave, Dongfang Yu snorted softly and signaled her subordinates to stop. She walked leisurely to Princess Xixia and looked at her with a smile. "How is it? Do you think Mo Jingli still likes you now? How dare you be so presumptuous in front of me? Who do you think you are? I want you to die with grievances." Princess Xixia raised her head. Her slightly red eyes were filled with endless hatred. "Dongfang Yu, young Master Qingchen will never look at you in the eye in this life. You're a twisted lunatic, a withered flower that no one wants. Even if young Master Qingchen likes a village girl, he will not like a slut like you. I curse you that you will never be able to get him in your lifetime. Beat her to death. I will definitely be married to young Master Qingchen. It's a pity that you won't have the fortune to see that day." Dongfang Yu's pretty face darkened as she said sternly. The whip sounded again. Princess Xixia, who had been cursing loudly, gradually fell silent. Princess consort, she's dead. Dongfang Yu looked with disgust at the person on the ground whose original appearance was almost unrecognizable. Throw her into a mass grave. Don't bury her. I want her body to be eaten by wild dogs. Everyone in the courtyard could not help but shiver. Even Dongfang Yu's own people could not help but show shock and fear in their eyes. Although the previous lords of Infinite Boundless Mountain were not soft-hearted people, after all, even soft-hearted people would not be able to control such a large force. However, there had never been such a ruthless and vicious person. This woman in front of them, was she really that intelligent and naive young master of Infinite Boundless Mountain? Chapter 891. Ignoring the crowd, Dongfang Yu snorted and walked outside. When she passed by Ying, she stopped and said in a low voice, "You better behave yourself. Otherwise, that bitch will be your role model." Ying was so scared that she took a few steps back and fell on the ground. Clenching her teeth and nodding in horror, Dongfang Yu curled her lips in disdain. "You're so useless. Are you really Yili's sister? Do you think Master Qingchen will like me? If Master Qingchen likes you, wouldn't he be blind and deaf?" But in front of Dongfang Yu, even if Ying had 10 times the courage, she would not dare to say that. She could only nod vigorously. Dongfang Yu ignored her and nodded in satisfaction. She turned and left. Seeing Princess Xixia being carried out without any pity, Ying felt weak all over and could not stand up at all. She had fought with Princess Xixia for more than 10 years. She had thought that the woman she was jealous of was Yili and the woman she hated the most was Princess Xixia. But she did not expect that the woman who had made her unhappy for 10 years would just die like this. Help me back to my room," Ying said weakly, not daring to stay any longer. Behind her, a pair of steady hands helped her up. An ordinary-looking servant girl dressed in Prince Li's maid uniform carefully helped Ying up and whispered in her ear, "Fourth young miss, don't be afraid. Dongfang Yu can't hurt you." Ying nodded. "Let's go back first." Everything that had happened today had given Ying too much shock. Not only because of Dongfang Yu's viciousness, but also because of Mo Jingli's heartlessness. If Mo Jingli could be so heartless to Princess Xixia, who had been doted on for 10 years, then to her, who had long fallen out of favor. Ying shivered and staggered back to her own courtyard with the help of the servant girl. In a mass grave somewhere outside Nanjing, a badly mutilated corpse was wrapped in a straw mat and casually thrown into the graveyard. In the cold graveyard, there was only the occasional cawing of the crows, which seemed particularly eerie and terrifying. After a long time, a black shadow appeared in the graveyard. He walked over to the corpse and squatted down to take a look. He checked the pulse and breathing of the badly mutilated corpse. He shook his head and praised, "Good technique." He raised his hand and stuffed a pill into her mouth. He didn't mind that she was bloody and dirty. He carried her and said lightly, "You're lucky to be alive. If you die, at least your corpse won't be exposed in the wilderness." After the man finished speaking, he carried the corpse on his shoulder and swaggered away from the graveyard. In a small courtyard in the city, the lanterns were lit. Yili sat under the lanterns and looked at the booklet in her hand. Wei Lin pushed open the door and entered. "Wang Fei." Yili put down the booklet and nodded. "How are they?" Wei Lin frowned and said, "Not good. Although the injuries on my body aren't fatal, it's still very dangerous. But since this morning, it seemed that she had a high fever. We can't find a doctor as good as Mr. Shenyang and Dr. Lin in Nanjing City. If the fever doesn't subside, I'm afraid she won't be able to live." Yili said indifferently, "Let's do our best and leave the rest to fate. Get someone to wipe her with strong wine and see if it can subside the fever." Wei Lin nodded and said somewhat uncomprehendingly, that woman isn't a good person either. Why does Wang Fei have to go to the trouble of saving her? Yi Li smiled faintly and said, this time, she really suffered an undeserved calamity. Moreover, Princess Xixia is indeed annoying, but she doesn't deserve to die. Also, she is still the sister of the Queen of Nanzhao. If I wasn't in Nanjiang City, it would naturally be fine. But since I am here, I have to do my best for the sake of the Queen of Nanzhao. Wei Lin then understood and nodded. This subordinate understands. No matter what, Wang Fei had saved Princess Xixia. The Queen of Nanzhao had to accept this favor. Has there been any movement in the Li Prince manor? Yi Li asked. Wei Lin shook his head. Not yet. The Li Prince's relationship with Dong Fangyu is very stiff. He doesn't allow Dong Fangyu to interfere in the manor's matters. In addition, our Prince Ding mansion still has infinite boundless mountain spies. Dong Fangyu gave the list to Mo Jingli. However, Li Wang Fei may also know that when Mo Jingli looked at the list, she was standing next to Mo Jingli. It's just that I don't know if she saw it or not. These 2 days, she was so scared that she refused to speak. Yi Li nodded. After all, she is a woman raised in the boudoir. Give her 2 days. Let the people below also check it as soon as possible. Yi Ying is not a professional spy. At that time, she may not have gone back to pay attention to the list. In addition, send a copy of the news to First Uncle and Xiao Yao. Let them pay attention to it. You can go. Wei Lin said, this subordinate will take his leave. Yi Li's action in Nanjiang City this time was not very low-key. She had a lot of things to do. If she was too secretive, it would easily arouse other people's suspicion. The Chu family was also a famous scholarly family in the Chu state. Now that the young master of the Chu family came to Nanjiang City, it was inevitable that some people would come to visit. Yi Li pushed all of them to her subordinates to receive them. Others only thought that the young master of the scholarly family was arrogant and did not take it seriously. Most of the young masters of famous families always had some temper. Young Master, Marquis Muyang's residence sent an invitation. At the door of the study, Zhuo Jing was holding an invitation and reported in a low voice. Yi Li returned to her senses from her contemplation. She raised her eyebrows and asked, what invitation? Zhuo Jing said, in 3 days, Nanjiang City will hold an annual chrysanthemum appreciation party. Marquis Muyang's residence sent an invitation. Yi Li smiled helplessly. Decline it. How can I be in the mood to attend the chrysanthemum appreciation party? Zhuo Jing whispered, Yaoji sent the news that Helian Zhen had arrived in Nanjiang City last night. Mo Jingli and Helian Zhen may attend the chrysanthemum appreciation party in 3 days. That's why I wanted to ask young master if you want to go. Hearing this, Yi Li's eyes flashed with a trace of coldness. Helian Zhen, in that case, let's go and have a look. Zhuo Jing nodded. Yes, this subordinate will go and prepare immediately. The weather in the south was warmer than the north, but at this time of year, only the chrysanthemum flowers were worth looking at. This chrysanthemum appreciation party could be said to be a big event in Nanjiang City at the end of autumn and the beginning of winter. In the city, whether it was the young masters or the young ladies of the boudoir, they all received invitations to attend. Even ordinary people could stroll around the city's flower market full of chrysanthemums and bring back 2 pots of chrysanthemums for the scenery. Early in the morning, Yi Li brought the slightly disguised Wei Lin and Zhuo Jing to the scene of the chrysanthemum appreciation party. This was a large courtyard of the Li Palace in Nanjiang City. She took the invitation and went in. As soon as she entered the door, she saw all kinds of chrysanthemums competing with each other. This made the courtyard less bleak in autumn and more colorful and bustling. What surprised Yili was that this chrysanthemum appreciation party was actually handed over to Ying, and not Dongfangyu, who had been in charge of the Li Palace. Perhaps she was frightened by Dongfangyu. It had been a few days, but Yi Ying's face was still not good. Dongfangyu sat on one side with an indifferent expression, but he seemed to be absent-minded. All the ladies of Nanjiang City were obviously used to Dongfangyu's appearance. No one went up to look for trouble. They just surrounded Yi Ying and greeted her. Chapter 892. Yili found a place not far away and sat down. She drank the chrysanthemum wine and smiled as if she was looking at the flowers casually. In fact, she had been paying attention to Yi Ying's situation. Wei Lin whispered to Yili, ever since Dongfangyu married into the Li Palace, she has not been good at socializing. In the beginning, she offended many people. But with Imo Jingli and Dongfanghui's protection, no one dared to do anything to her. After that, many things in the Li Palace were handled by Princess Xixia and concubine Xian Zhao. This time, Princess Xixia died. I heard that concubine Xian Zhao was so angry that she was bedridden. That was why concubine Rong was in charge of the overall situation. Yili raised her eyebrows and looked at Dongfangyu from afar. She asked, "Do you think she has changed a lot?" Xue Jing nodded. She has changed a lot. In the past, Dongfangyu gave people the feeling that she was self-righteous but did not know anything. But now, even if Dongfangyu sat there without saying or doing anything, she still gave people a chilling feeling. You could tell by looking at how the women around her all avoided her and squeezed to Yi Ying's side. In fact, Yi Ying was more afraid. If she could, she would have stood up and run away. She did not want to be with Dongfangyu for a moment. It has been less than half a year. This woman has changed too much. Wei Lin said in disbelief. It was not that people could not change. But Dongfangyu's change could be said to be two extremes. How perverted did she have to be to change so much all of a sudden? Yili also sighed. The word love. How can outsiders like us explain it clearly? Mo Jingli is here. Xue Jing whispered. Yili looked up and saw Mo Jingli not far away, surrounded by a group of guards. Walking side by side with Mo Jingli was a man in his 50s, dressed in the clothes of the Central Plains, but his figure and appearance were obviously different from the people of the Central Plains. Although Yili had not really seen He Lianjin, she knew that the man walking with Mo Jingli must be He Lianjin. Judging from the expressions on their faces, it was obvious that even if the alliance had not been finalized, it should be close. Yili frowned slightly. Although Mo Xiuyao had the ambition to wipe out the three allied forces in one fell swoop, Yili felt that it was still a bit risky. Even when she came to Jiangnan, she was still considering whether or not she should try to destroy this alliance. However, due to his trust in Mo Xiuyao, he suppressed this thought. While Yili was looking at Mo Jingli and the others, Mo Jingli was also looking at Yili and the others. Yili was dressed in white. She was shorter than Xue Jing and Wei Lin, who were standing behind her. However, her appearance and aura were far from comparable to the two of them. If they had seen such an elegant young man, they would definitely not forget him. Mo Jingli glanced at him and frowned involuntarily. He asked, "Who is that?" Mo Jingli's guards were all ordinary guards. How could they know the identity of a young man who they had never met before? One of them apologized in a low voice and left to investigate Yili's identity. Yili was confident in her disguise. Seeing Mo Jingli staring at her, she did not avoid him. She stepped forward openly and cupped her hands with a smile. Yunzhou's Chu Junwei greets the regent. Hearing the words Yunzhou, Mo Jingli could not help but frown. When people mentioned Yunzhou, the first thing that came to mind was not that it was a heavenly treasure and was as rich as Jiangnan. Instead, it was the Su family of Yunzhou. Although Mo Jingli did not know who Chu Junwei was, he remembered that the first madam of the Su family's family was surnamed Chu. Moreover, the surname Chu was also a prominent family in Yunzhou. He raised his eyebrows and said, "So it's young Master Chu. How should I address the first young master of the Su family and young Master Chu?" Yili smiled and said, "Prince is too polite. The father of the first madam of the Su family and my grandfather are cousins. Speaking of which, I can barely call young Master Su cousin." This relationship did not seem distant, but it was not close either. There were not many members of the Su family, but the Chu family was an extremely large family in Yunzhou. The main branch of the family, the main branch, and the side branch, there were at least a few hundred if not 1,000. Moreover, the first madam of the Su family did not have any direct siblings. After marrying into the Su family, she did not have a close relationship with the Chu family. Therefore, it was a bit difficult for Chu Junwei to have any relationship with the Su family. Mo Jingli nodded and looked at Yili, pushing the faint sense of familiarity to the back of his mind. Dr. Su was a relative of the Su family, so it was not surprising that he had some similarities with Su Qingqin. The Chu family has lived in Yunzhou for a long time. Why did young Master Chu come to Jiangnan? Yili lowered his eyes and smiled bitterly. He said lightly, "Although I am the son of the first wife, I am from a side branch. Moreover, Yunzhou now." He shook his head as if sighing, "There is no reason for me to stay in Yunzhou. Therefore, I wanted to come to Jiangnan to have a look. It's just a trip." "Thank you for your concern, Prince." Mo Jingli looked at him for a long time and did not notice anything wrong. He nodded and said, "In that case, I hope young Master Chu will enjoy himself. The Chu family is also a famous family in the Chu state. If young Master Chu wants to stay in Nanjing and do something for the Chu state, why don't you come to the regent's residence in 2 days and we can talk?" Yili was stunned. She did not expect that Mo Jingli would want to recruit her. It was just that whether he wanted to recruit Chu Junwei or the Chu family behind him was worth discussing. Although she had no intention of becoming an official, Yili still pretended to be flattered. She cupped her hands and said, "Thank you, Prince. In a few days, I will definitely pay you a visit." Helianzhen was also there. Mo Jingli naturally could not pay attention to Yili for too long. He nodded and walked with Helianzhen into the garden. Helianzhen turned around and looked at Yili and the others with some doubt. He smiled and asked, "That young Master Chu seems to be very extraordinary. I did not expect that in the Chu state, other than the immortal young master of the Su family, there would be such a handsome person." Mo Jingli had no intention of talking more. He smiled faintly and said, "The Chu family is a famous family in the Chu state. They have produced many outstanding people in the past. In the Chu state, how can only the young master of the Su family be outstanding?" Helianzhen smiled faintly and did not say anything. He turned around and looked back. He saw that handsome young master looking at him with a faint smile. He did not know why, but a feeling of uneasiness suddenly rose in his heart. When he looked again, he saw that young Master Chu had already walked in another direction with 2 guards. In the center of the garden full of chrysanthemums, there was an open pavilion. On the second floor, Mo Jingli and Helianzhen sat facing each other. Helianzhen drank a mouthful of chrysanthemum wine. He could not help but frown and say, "The wine of your central plains is indeed fragrant, but it does not have the taste of alcohol. The people of the northern tribes loved strong alcohol. Naturally, they would not be interested in a honey wine like the chrysanthemum wine." Mo Jingli did not mind. His expression was indifferent as he sipped the fine wine. He smiled and said, "Strong wine has its benefits, and this chrysanthemum wine also has its benefits. This wine needs to be tasted carefully. Although both sides had a common understanding of the alliance, they still felt disdain for each other in their hearts. The people of the northern tribes looked down on the people of the Central Plains. The people of the Central Plains also looked down on the people of the northern tribes. Chapter 893. Heliangen put down his wine cup and frowned. He looked at Mo Jingli and said, "What do you think of my previous proposal?" Mo Jingli was silent. It was not that he deliberately wanted to tempt Heliangen. Mo Jingli was naturally moved by Heliangen's proposal, but it was not so easy to decide if he wanted to go to war with the Prince Ding mansion. Even though Mo Jingli now had the whole of Jiangnan firmly in his hands, he could not guarantee that if he wanted to go to war with the Prince Ding mansion, how many people in the court would support him. Looking at Mo Jingli's hesitant appearance, Helian Peng knew that it was not that Mo Jingli was not moved, but that the bait he offered was not big enough. With Mo Jingli's temperament, as long as the temptation was big enough, he would never consider whether to be the enemy of the Prince Ding mansion or the heavens. After a moment of silence, Heliangen said in a deep voice, "Princely, to tell you the truth, before I came to Nanjing, I went to see Genom of Gojosian." Mo Jingli was startled. He narrowed his eyes and said to Heliangen, "What does General Helian mean?" Heliangen smiled and said, "This time I sincerely want to form an alliance with Prince Li and Genom of Gojosian. And I have already persuaded Genom of Gojosian. As long as Prince Li is willing to form an alliance and send troops, Genom of Gojosian can give up a part of the benefits." Hearing this, Mo Jingli's eyes flashed slightly. But his expression did not change. Instead, he sneered and said, "Sincerely form an alliance. I'm afraid the northern tribes can't stand the Prince Ding mansion's attack." A trace of anger flashed through Heliangen's eyes, but he suppressed it in an instant. He stared at Mo Jingli and said, "At present, the northern tribes are indeed at a disadvantage in the war with the Prince Ding mansion, but Prince Li may not be able to stand it. Our northern tribes has a strong army and strong horses. Even in Dechu state, we still have close to 1 million soldiers. Reinforcements from the northern tribes could also arrive any time. Furthermore, what good would it do Prince Li if my northern tribes were to lose?" Mo Jingli's expression turned ugly. If the northern tribes were to be chased out of the north by Mo Xiuyao, the Prince Ding mansion would become even more powerful. And from now on, the Prince Ding mansion could rightfully occupy the entire northern region. After all, the Prince Ding mansion was no longer related to the Dechu state. The Dechu state threw the northern territory to the northern tribes and the northern territory. Then the Prince Ding mansion flattened the northern territory and chased the northern tribes away. These places naturally had nothing to do with the Dechu state and Mo Jingli. After a long silence, Mo Jingli said in a low voice, "I'm afraid no one in the Dechu state's imperial court will agree to an alliance with the northern tribes in Western Hill." This was what Mo Jingli was most worried about. If the Western Hill and the northern tribes took over the Dechu state's land, the Dechu state's imperial court would not expel the enemy and restore the land. Instead, the northern tribes in Western Hill would ally with the Mahist army. This would be a cause for criticism. Heliangen laughed and said, "I believe these small matters will not be able to stop Prince Li. Let's see if Prince Li wants to defeat Mo Xiuyao and destroy the Prince Ding mansion." Mo Jingli was silent, but his mind was already spinning rapidly. He naturally wanted to defeat Mo Xiuyao. Ever since he was young, he had dreamed of ruthlessly trampling Mo Xiuyao under his feet. Even though his current status was no less than Mo Xiuyao's, in front of him, he still seemed to be a level lower. Therefore, he always hoped that one day he could truly trample Mo Xiuyao under his feet, and take back everything that originally belonged to him. If the northern tribes were really defeated by Mo Xiuyao, Lei Jinting was already old, and Lei Tingfeng did not seem like he could be Mo Xiuyao's opponent. Enchanting would probably be defeated by Immerse once he went to Western Hill. At that time, he would not be able to hold the fort alone, and would never have the chance to turn the tables. But now, if the allied armies of the three countries pressed on the border, even if Immerse had the ability to reach the heavens, he would definitely not be able to resist the three countries' 2 to 3 million troops at the same time. Then the chances of victory were still very high. Heartwarming smiled as he looked at Immerse's sometimes hesitant and sometimes conflicted appearance, and said with a smile, Genom of Gojosian has already promised. As long as King Li agrees to send troops, he will immediately withdraw his men from Guangling City and the 4 provinces to the north. This can be considered a show of sincerity to King Li, and also to let King Li's troops pass through without worry. What does King Li think? Immerse tightly gripped the wine cup in his hand, not even noticing that the fragrant chrysanthemum wine had spilled onto his hand. Why is King Li so hesitant? When the three of you defeat the Prince Ding mansion, the Dechu state can also return the capital to the Chu capital. Everything that King Li has lost will be returned, and even more, King Li can obtain even more. Heartwarming stared fixedly at Immerse, and said without stopping. Immerse gritted his teeth, and a trace of ruthlessness flashed through his eyes. He said in a low voice, Fine, I will agree to General Heartwarming's request. The Dechu state will send troops to the north in a few days. Heartwarming was overjoyed, and didn't have time to dislike the bland chrysanthemum wine in his cup. He raised his cup and said with a smile, Since that's the case, let's first wish for our army to succeed, and destroy the Mahist army in one fell swoop. Immerse was silent, and only raised his head, and fiercely poured all the wine in his cup into his mouth. Seeing him like this, Heartwarming finally let out a loud laugh. In the garden, amidst the colorful and varied chrysanthemums, countless young masters, princes, scholars, and beauties were reciting poems and making couplets, laughing and talking endlessly. Yili picked up a brush and wrote a poem about chrysanthemums on a rice paper. Rustling west wind fills the courtyard, the cold fragrance of the bud makes it difficult for the cold butterflies to come. If I become the Qing emperor in the future, I will repay the peach blossoms. Slowly finishing the last stroke, Heartwarming's complacent laughter reached her ears. Yili put down the brush and said with a faint smile, Looks like the negotiations are successful. Chapter 894. Hearing Yili's words, Zhuo Jing and Wei Lin both turned to look at the magnificent loft not far away. In terms of internal energy, they were above Yili. If Yili could hear Heartwarming's laughter, they could naturally hear it clearly as well. Wei Lin furrowed his brows and said in a low voice, Young master, do you want to? Yili smiled and waved her hand. She carefully picked up the words she had just written and dried them in the direction of the wind, just like any other rich young master in the garden. Although Yili was dressed in white and elegant, causing many young ladies to feel their hearts beat faster and their faces blushed, the 2 bodyguards behind her didn't seem to be any good. However, the 2 guards by his side didn't seem to be friendly people. Many people who wanted to talk to him stopped in their tracks. Zhuo Jing and Wei Lin looked at the people around them and couldn't help but feel admiration for their princess consort's meticulous planning. Zhuo Jing's handsome face had a 3-inch-long scar. The sinister scar, coupled with his cold expression, made people tremble with fear. Although Wei Lin had a perfect and handsome face, his head of gray hair, coupled with his orchid eyes, made people of all races come and go in Li City. The citizens of Li City were already used to it, but Nanjing City was different. At the very least, it definitely wouldn't be a problem to frighten these young ladies who had been raised in their boudoirs. Although Wei Lin and Zhuo Jing had previously questioned whether this kind of dressing was too conspicuous and would easily attract attention. However, Yili smiled faintly and said, It's precisely because spies won't attract attention that such a high-profile person naturally wouldn't be a spy. Even if Immerse racked his brains, he would never think that Yi Li would dress up as a man and appear in front of him. As expected, the two bodyguards, coupled with the Chu family's young master's white robes, seemed to have a unique and noble aura that stood above everyone else. Not only did the people who saw them not find it strange, they also naturally thought that this was the style of a young master from a prestigious family. They often praised the Chu family for being a famous family with a long history in the Chu state. This young master has written a good poem. Yi Li put down the scroll in her hand and was about to leave when a familiar female voice came from behind her. When he turned around, he saw Dongfang Yu, who was dressed in white, standing not far away and staring at him. Yi Li knew that it was her face that had caused the trouble, but she did not care. She had to find a chance to get close to Dongfang Yu. Now that Dongfang Yu was willing to come over, it was naturally the best. With a faint smile, he cupped his hands and said, "Chu Junwei greets the Princess Regent." Hearing the words "Regent's consort," Dongfang Yu frowned and nodded. Chu Junwei. Was he the young master of the Chu family in Yunzhou? I wonder how the third young master of the Chu family is doing. A trace of doubt appeared on Yi Li's face, and she looked at Dongfang Yu with a smile. So the consort knows young Master Wei Yun. However, although I have not interacted much with my brothers in the family these few years, I still remember that Wei Yun is the fourth in the family. Third brother's name is Wei Feng. Yi Li did not care about Dongfang Yu's probing. Since they wanted to deal with Chu Junwei, how could the Prince Ding mansion not have made preparations? Not to mention Chu Junwei's identity, even his parents' life had long been arranged properly. Yi Li naturally remembered clearly who the Chu family was. Dongfang Yu did not mind, and said indifferently, "Maybe I remembered wrongly. I met fourth young Master Chu once a few years ago." Yi Li laughed in her heart. Dongfang Yu's words were too shameless. Who did not know that Dongfang Yu had just left the infinite boundless mountain this year? How could he have met Chu Wei Yun once a few years ago? What's more, how old was Dongfang Yu a few years ago? Yi Li naturally would not expose her words. She smiled gently and said, "What can I do for the consort?" Dongfang Yu was silent. In fact, she did not know what she wanted to say. But when she passed by, she saw the faint smile on the face of the young master in white. Somehow, she thought of another man who seemed to always be in white. She could not help but speak. After a moment of silence, Dongfang Yu said, "Young Master Chu has lived in Yunzhou. Now that he has just arrived in Nanjing, if there is any inconvenience, you can send someone to the Prince Regent's mansion to find me." Yi Li was slightly startled, and immediately said with a smile, "The consort is too polite." "Thank you, consort. If there is any trouble, I will have to trouble the consort." Dongfang Yu looked at her in a daze, and said faintly, "If he is like you." Halfway through, she suddenly realized, and the rest of the words naturally did not need to be said. Yi Li just pretended not to hear, and smiled gently. "Consort, if there is nothing else, I will leave first." Dongfang Yu nodded and said, "Sorry to disturb you. I will also leave first." "Consort, please take care." Yi Li bowed and said. Looking at Dongfang Yu's back, Xue Jing said with some confusion, "Young master, this Dongfang Yu seems a little abnormal." "It's not just abnormal." Wei Lin opened his mouth and said, "The way she looked at young master just now clearly made one's hair stand on end." Fifth young master is right. Eldest young master is really unlucky to have provoked such a woman. Looking at the way Dongfang Yu looked at the consort, even outsiders like them could not help but feel their hearts tremble. It was rare that the consort could still maintain such a calm expression. More importantly, the consort was a stranger whom they had only met once, and who was somewhat similar to young Master Qingqin. If she were to face young Master Qingqin, Wei Lin could not help but shudder. He hoped that young Master Qinchin had not seen such a Dongfang Yu. Yili sighed softly, and said with some regret, one thought to become a Buddha, another to become a demon. Zhuo Jing said, young master means that this Dongfang Yu actually became a demon because she could not love eldest young master. Yili closed the fan in his hand and said, in short, we have to find eldest brother as soon as possible. Looking at Dongfang Yu now, she probably can't take it anymore. Let the people following Dongfang Yu keep a close eye on her. Yes. Zhuo Jing replied. Prince Regent's residence in the study, Dongfang Yu looked expressionlessly at Mo Jingli, who was full of self-satisfaction, but her mind had already drifted to an unknown place. Mo Jingli stopped and glanced at Dongfang Yu, who was obviously in a daze. A trace of displeasure flashed across his face. Now, Mo Jingli's impression of Dongfang Yu could not be any lower. If possible, Mo Jingli could not wait to kill this woman in front of him. This woman had power that everyone envied and coveted, but she did not do anything and only threw herself at a man who did not even open his eyes to look at her. Not only did she use all her means, but she also became crazy, vicious and ruthless. If not for the fact that he did not want to have a conflict with Dongfang Yu, Mo Jingli really wanted to tell Dongfang Yu that as a man, the more she pestered him, the more Su Qinchin would hate her. I have already decided to form an alliance with Xiling and the northern tribes. Where did you hide young Master Qinchin? Give him to me immediately, I have a use for him. Mo Jingli suppressed the anger in his heart and said in a low voice. When he dared to capture Su Qinchin, it was not to give him to this woman to be infatuated with. Su Qinchin could be said to be the third important person in the Prince Ding mansion after Mo Xiaoyao and Yili. With him in hand, many things were much more convenient. Chapter 895. Dongfang Yu's eyes flashed, and she said unhappily, I said, I don't know. Mo Jingli sneered, do you think I'm a fool? Dongfang Yu, I am giving you face now. Jiangnan is I's place. Do you think I can't find him if you don't say I? Seeing Mo Jingli like this, Dongfang Yu was no longer polite. She said coldly, then I'm warning you. If you dare to touch a hair of his, don't blame me for being rude. Mo Jingli now understood Dongfang Yu's character. He took a deep breath and said mockingly, even if you don't give him to me, what do you want to do? Lock him up for life. Do you think all the people in the Prince Ding mansion are dead? Maybe the people in the Prince Ding mansion are already looking for him all over Jiangnan. With the ability of the shadow guards in the Prince Ding mansion, how much time do you think they need? Dongfang Yu was silent for a while. She looked up at Mo Jingli and said proudly, don't waste your time. As long as I don't want to, no one can find him. Mo Jingli finally couldn't stand it anymore. He glared at Dongfang Yu for a long time before he said coldly, Dongfang Yu, you can die with Su Qinchin in your arms. I'm afraid that Su Qinchin won't even want to die with you. After that, he didn't care about what Dongfang Yu said. He turned and slammed the door of the study. Mo Jingli walked quickly into the Li Palace. Just by looking at his back, one could see the anger in his eyes. His confidants behind him looked at each other worriedly and asked carefully, Prince, about the princess. Mo Jingli paused and said in a low voice, don't worry about her. If she wants to go out in the future, let her go. I want to see how long she can endure it. The person behind him nodded and said, Prince is wise. She can't endure it for long because of her feelings for Master Qinchin. We are right behind her, like the mantis stalking the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. Although he had no feelings for Dongfang Yu, she was still his legal wife. Dongfang Yu's infatuation with young Master Qinchin was exposed by his subordinate. Mo Jingli's face darkened even more. He snorted and left in a huff. Mo Jingli was busy with the alliance with West Hill and the northern tribes. He did not have much time to pay attention to Dongfang Yu and only sent people to keep an eye on her. Meanwhile, in the imperial court, Mo Jingli had suddenly thrown out a powerful bomb, causing an uproar. Even those who supported Mo Jingli could not help but look at the regent, who was full of self-satisfaction, as if they were looking at a madman, not to mention those old officials who had a good impression of the Prince Ding mansion. Mo Jingli had just dropped the news of forming an alliance with the northern tribes of Western Tomb. Before he had the chance to talk about his great ambitions and plans, someone from the Highness stood up and said in a low voice, "Prince, you can't do this." Mo Jingli looked at the person in front of him and his face immediately darkened. Mo Jingli had dealt with the Empress Dowager's party for so long. If he still did not know who was supporting the Empress Dowager, Mo Jingli would have lived in vain all these years. Mo Jingqi had a falling out with the Empress Dowager when he was alive. Many of the Empress Dowager's original supporters had been removed by him. Under such circumstances, there was no one else other than the Prince Ding mansion that could keep the Empress Dowager in and out of the imperial court. Therefore, Mo Jingli directly regarded the Empress Dowager's people as Mo Xiuyao's people. Naturally, he wanted to skin them alive and pull out their tendons. He looked coldly at the Highness's people and asked, "Why not?" The minister who stood up said seriously, "West Hill and the northern tribes invaded our territory and killed our people. As the regent of the Dechu state, the prince is in charge of the Dechu state. How can he form an alliance with them? What's the difference between this and acknowledging a thief as your father? How dare you?" Mo Jingli was so angry that his face darkened. He angrily rebuked. "Lord Wang is absolutely right. Prince, please reconsider," everyone said in unison. Mo Jingli looked carefully and saw that more than 80% of the courtiers had knelt in agreement. Even the remaining 20% had expressions of disapproval. Actually, when Mo Jingli had originally agreed to form an alliance with West Hill and the northern tribes, he knew that this would be the result. But when he saw that so many people were against him, the feeling that the entire world was against him still made Mo Jingli furious. He stared coldly at the courtiers kneeling in front of him and said, "West Hill and the northern tribes are enemies of the Dechu state. Is the Prince Ding mansion not an enemy? Isn't the land that Mo Xiuyao is occupying Dechu state? I want to know, are you loyal to the Dechu state or the Prince Ding mansion?" Such heart-wrenching words immediately made many of the old courtiers in the court feel a chill in their hearts. Many of these old courtiers had served 2 or even 3 dynasties. If not for their loyalty to the Dechu state, they would have directly sought refuge with the Prince Ding mansion. Even if they could not obtain important positions, they could at least live out their old age peacefully. But now, because they had disobeyed King Li's wishes, they had been labeled as disloyal to the Dechu state. How could they not feel disheartened? Moreover, King Li's decision to form an alliance with West Hill and the northern tribes was a huge mistake. No matter who won or lost in the end, they would go down in infamy. We do not have such intentions, but we cannot form an alliance with West Hill and the northern tribes. Regent, please reconsider, the courtiers said in unison. Mo Jingli waved his sleeve unhappily and said, "I have already made up my mind. There is no need to discuss it further." As he said this, Mo Jingli's gaze swept over the little emperor who was sitting on the dragon throne with tears in his eyes because of the sudden change in atmosphere. A dark light flashed through Mo Jingli's eyes. He walked to the little emperor's side and asked in a low voice, "Emperor, what do you think of Ai's decision?" The little emperor Mo Jingli had always been afraid of this regent royal uncle. Being stared at by Mo Jingli, he immediately burst into tears. Mo Jingli glanced at him with disgust and roared in a low voice, "What are you crying for? You are the emperor. Acting like this in front of the courtiers is not proper. I am asking you a question." The little emperor was so frightened that he choked. His tear-filled face immediately turned red. He choked and said, "Royal uncle." "Woo-woo, what royal uncle said, is right." Mo Jingli snorted softly and glanced at the people below. "Did you hear that? This is the emperor's intention. You don't want to respect I's decree. Could it be that you also want to disobey the emperor's decree?" The courtiers were speechless. The little emperor was only 8 or 9 years old. Moreover, he had been frightened by Mo Jingli for the past 2 years. Even if the Empress Dowager tried her best to teach him, it was useless. He was even worse than an ordinary 8 or 9-year-old child. But what could they say? That the emperor was still young and insensible? That what he said did not count? A few old courtiers could only secretly lament in their hearts that the young emperor was isolated and the powerful courtiers were stealing the country. "Li Wang, what do you want to do?" The Empress Dowager walked out from the back of the hall and coldly looked at her only son. When Mo Jingli saw the Empress Dowager come out, his face sank. He faintly said, "The imperial harem cannot interfere with politics." Why did Imperial Mother come to the court at this time? When the little emperor saw the Empress Dowager, the tears that had just stopped flowed out again. He looked at the Empress Dowager and cried loudly. "Woo-woo, royal grandmother. Grandson is afraid." Looking at Mo Jingli's cold eyes, the Empress Dowager only felt her vision turn black. She only had Mo Jingli, this one son, left. If possible, how could she not want to live in harmony with her own son? But when Mo Jingchi passed away, the two of them were too tense. In these 2 years, the Empress Dowager increasingly understood that in the eyes of this son, her position as imperial mother was not as high as his aunt, the virtuous old concubine. The Empress Dowager had been high and mighty all her life. How could she tolerate the son that she had raised to take away her power and be raised in the palace to look at other people's faces? After that, Mo Jingli had the help of the boundless mountain and was against the Empress Dowager's people everywhere. The relationship between mother and son became more and more tense. Chapter 896. However, the Empress Dowager did not come out this time to argue with Mo Jingli. She really did not understand what was going on in her son's mind. Indeed, the Empress Dowager had once wanted to deal with the Prince Ding mansion. However, even when the Prince Ding mansion was at its weakest, the Empress Dowager had never thought of going against the Prince Ding mansion openly. She had followed the late emperor and watched him spend half his life trying to deal with the Prince Ding mansion, but failed every time. He also saw how talented Mo Lufang was back then, and how stunning she was. She had also seen how her eldest son did not hesitate to sacrifice the Dechu state to suppress the Mahist army. She had also seen how Mo Xiuyao pushed the Prince Ding mansion back to its peak from the crippled prince who had been in imminent danger. Unconsciously, the Empress Dowager had a feeling that the Prince Ding mansion was not something that ordinary people could deal with. Most importantly, even if the allied forces of the 3 families really destroyed the Prince Ding mansion this time, so what? Would Xiling and the northern tribes push out the land of the Dechu state? Of course not. Without the Mahist army's deterrence and restraint, they would only crazily annex the land of the Dechu state. She was afraid that she would not even have a peaceful life in her lifetime. Mo Jingli did not know what the Empress Dowager was thinking. He only saw that the Empress Dowager, as his birth mother, had gone against him in all these years. She even did not hesitate to rely on the Prince Ding mansion to help Mo Xiuyao restrain him. At this time, seeing that the Empress Dowager wanted to stop his good deed, he said coldly, "Mother, as a member of the harem, it is better for you to return to the palace and rest. The matters of the imperial court will naturally be handled by me and the ministers." Or could it be that Imperial Mother really wanted to get involved in politics? I still remember brother's portrait. Mo Jingli, you. The Empress Dowager was so angry that her entire body trembled. The portrait Imo Jingli had left behind before his death was a taboo in the Empress Dowager's heart. Now that Imo Jingli had brought it out with such fanfare, there was even a faint hint of threat. The Empress Dowager finally couldn't take it anymore. Her vision turned black, and her body fell backward. Imo Jingli glanced at the Empress Dowager, who had fainted on the ground, and coldly ordered, "Imperial Mother is sick. Why haven't you sent her back for the imperial physicians to treat her? If you let the Empress Dowager walk around and hurt her body, I will ask you." Seeing the Empress Dowager being helped down, the hope in the hearts of the ministers was once again shattered. Imo Jingli looked down at the crowd and said, "Imo Xiuyao led hundreds of thousands of Mahist army to occupy the northwest, northeast, and Chu capital. He has long since betrayed the Chu state, and is the greatest traitor in the world. I formed an alliance with the West Hill and the northern tribes in order to eradicate the rebels and help the country. If anyone has any objections, they will be punished for treason." After that, he no longer paid attention to the ministers and the pitiful little emperor, and left in a huff. In Nanjing, the most discussed topic these days was the alliance between Prince Li and the West Hill and the northern tribes to fight against the Mahist army. Among them, there were many respected elders who cried to the sky in broad daylight, saying that the Chu state was doomed. Although the Mahist army and the Chu state no longer had any relationship, in the eyes of many elders, it was not so easy to cut off all ties. There were many people who wholeheartedly hoped that the Prince Ding mansion would help the country and save the Chu state. Even if it wasn't for this, the Prince Ding mansion had protected the Chu state for hundreds of years. Even after being driven away by the royal family, it could be said that they had never done anything wrong to the Chu state. The Prince Regent's actions were heartless, ungrateful, and immoral. Wasn't such an imperial court abandoned by the heavens? At the same time, the common people also scolded this. Although Imo Jingli wanted to ban it, he was already in trouble both internally and externally. It made his head hurt. If he forcibly banned the common people's speech, he was afraid that the officials would really force the people to rebel. Left with no choice, Imo Jingli decided that what the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve. At the same time, he issued orders to mobilize the army and prepare for the upcoming expedition to the north. In a quiet tea house, Yili sat in a side room and drank tea with a smile. Although the door was closed, the discussions of the customers outside still flowed into the side room. It could be seen how intense the debate outside was. This situation did not only appear in this inn, but also in all the other tea houses and restaurants in Nanjing. The common people did not care about the imperial court, so naturally, the noise became more and more intense. There were many people who scolded Imo Jingli all day long. Wang. Master, what do you think of these people's words? In the side room, Yaoji sat opposite, looking at the leisurely man in white in front of her with a smile. Yili smiled faintly. "I'm afraid these will not affect Prince Li's decision." Yaoji tilted her head in thought, and could only sigh. Isn't Prince Li's hatred for the Prince Ding mansion an obsession? If Prince Li really sees it clearly, he should know that the alliance with the West Hill and the northern tribes is not good for him. No matter whether the Mahist army wins or loses, he will go down in infamy. Unfortunately, Imo Jingli was too obsessed with defeating Imo Xiuyao. So even if there was only a slight chance, he wanted to see Imo Xiuyao defeated in front of him. Marquis Muyang's mansion has also received Prince Li's order. Marquis Muyang and Muyang will go to war together. Yaoji said softly. Yili nodded, not surprised. There were not many generals in the Chu state who were good at war. Ling Huai and Marquis Nan had already submitted to the Prince Ding mansion. Although Murongxin did not express it clearly, his actions had already proved his thoughts. Moreover, Murongxin was not only Imo Liufang's old subordinate, but also the father-in-law of Leng Haoyu, Prince Ding's confidant. It was inseparable from the Prince Ding mansion. Although Marquis Muyang was old, Ling Huai and Marquis Nan, who were about the same age as him, were still dominating the battlefield. Naturally, he would not have any problems. Since Mo Jingli has already decided, then I should give him a generous gift. Yili smiled faintly, and took out a list from her sleeve and placed it in front of Yaoji and Qin Feng. Yaoji picked it up and looked at it, and asked doubtfully, "Master, this is," Yili said in a low voice, "kill all the people on this list." Yili's voice was neither happy nor angry. It was as calm as the surface of the sea, but it made people feel the danger of the deep sea. The people on this list were all important figures in the Chu state's army. Perhaps they were not in a high position, but they would have a big impact on the army if they left. But what made Yaoji feel strange was that Muyang and Marquis Muyang's names were not on the list. Yili looked at her and smiled faintly, "Don't be surprised. This time, Marquis Muyang and his son will definitely become the commander-in-chief of the Chu army. If something happens to them, it will be a problem whether the Chu army can still set off. Mo Jingli has already gotten involved, so don't even think about getting out. These people are not important or conspicuous, just get rid of them. Big Brother is still in Dongfang Yu's hands, don't attract attention." Qin Feng put away the list and nodded, "Don't worry, Master." Yili nodded and asked, "Is there any news about Ying? Does she know about the list that Dongfang Yu gave to Mo Jingli?" Yaoji hesitated, and said in a low voice, "She knows, but she won't say." Yili was slightly startled, and pondered for a moment before nodding, "I know what she means. She is afraid that I will go back on my word and not tell her the whereabouts of the child." Yaoji asked, "Then should we try to?" Chapter 897. Yili shook her head, "There's no need. Yi Ying has never accomplished anything in her entire life. But once she has made up her mind about something, it will be very difficult to get any real information from her. Rather than wasting time trying to verify it after she tells us, it's better to get her to say it willingly." Yaoji frowned, "But, if something happens to Glass City and the prince, Dongfang Yu said that it's not someone important. Then it shouldn't be someone close to Xiao Yao. Even if Mo Jingli wants to use it, he won't be in a hurry. Eldest uncle and second uncle should be investigating as well," Yili said in a low voice. Yaoji thought that Prince Ding and Mr. Hongyu were both extraordinary people. It would be very difficult for Dongfang Yu's people to scheme against them. Otherwise, how could they not even know that Infinite Boundless Mountain was in danger of extinction? Hearing Yili's words, Yaoji no longer paid attention to this matter. Looking at Yili, she asked, "After Marquis Muyang dispatches his troops, what should Yaoji do?" "Young master, please instruct me." Yili looked at her deeply, sighing softly, "Yaoji, you really don't have to force yourself like this." Yaoji nodded with a smile. Yaoji understands young master's meaning. Since Yaoji has already made her decision, I naturally won't spoil young masters in the Prince Ding Mansion's matters. Yili played with her fan absent-mindedly, thinking for a while before saying, "Since that's the case, when the Dechu state dispatches its troops, you can go with him." Yaoji frowned, "I'm afraid Marquis Muyang won't agree." Other than the generals who had been stationed at the border for a long time, it was not allowed to bring along family members when marching to war. Moreover, she wasn't a woman like Princess Ding who was proficient in both the pen and the sword, able to strategize and command thousands of troops. It was impossible for Muyang to bring her along. Yili smiled, "As long as Yaoji is willing, she will naturally think of a way." Yaoji was startled for a moment, then she smiled mildly, "Yaoji understands. Thank you for your advice, young master." "Young master, Wei Lin requests an audience." Outside the door, Wei Lin said in a low voice. Yaoji and Qin Feng stood up. Qin Feng said, "Young master, I'll take my leave first." Yili nodded and said, "You can follow Yaoji these days. As I said before, you are in charge of everything in Marquis Muyang's mansion." Qin Feng nodded. "Qin Feng thanks young master." Yili said softly, "Going too far is as bad as falling short. You should understand what I mean." Qin Feng silently nodded, turned around and left with Yaoji. Wei Lin entered and did not even bother to greet him. He said in a low voice, reporting to young master, "Dongfang Yu has left the residence." Yi Li's expression changed slightly. She stood up abruptly but quickly sat back down. She asked in a deep voice, "She's alone?" Wei Lin shook his head. "He only brought 2 guards, both of whom are from Infinite Boundless Mountain." Yi Li lowered her brows and thought for a moment before saying, "Dongfang Yu's martial arts are extraordinary. Don't get too close lest she discovers you." Wei Lin nodded, "Young master, please be at ease. With our abilities, as long as we can determine the general location, we will definitely be able to find young master Qingqin. It's just that young master Qingqin doesn't even have the strength to truss up a chicken. I wonder." Yili waved her hands, seeing Dongfang Yu's situation 2 days ago, she shouldn't have seen Big Brother. Big Brother shouldn't be in any danger. Wei Lin nodded. That Dongfang Yu was madly in love with young master Qingqin. She probably wouldn't harm him easily. Yili thought for a moment, then asked, "Have you investigated Infinite Boundless Mountain's influence in Jiangnan?" Wei Lin said, "After Infinite Boundless Mountain was destroyed, their influence in Jiangnan changed. However, there were still many clues left behind. We can follow the clues and find out about 70 to 80% of them. Young master, do you want to make a move now?" Yili shook her head, saying, "No, wait until Mo Jingli leaves before making a move." Wei Lin blinked, saying hesitantly, "Young master means that this time, Mo Jingli will personally head out." Yili sighed somewhat helplessly, saying, "Xiuyao is playing too big this time. I'm afraid that not only will Mo Jingli personally head out, even Enchanting will personally go as well." This Mo Jingli was indeed not a big deal. However, Enchanting was a little troublesome. Although he had clashed with the Prince Ding mansion several times, Enchanting didn't seem to have the upper hand. However, other than the time when he underestimated the enemy because of the princess, the remaining times could be said to be due to the circumstances. Enchanting's ability was far from what Mo Jingli and Yilu Yi could imagine. Yili smiled mildly, nodding her head, saying, "It's nothing. Since he chose this way, what I can do for him is to try my best to reduce the pressure on him." "Princess, if the prince really?" Wei Lin couldn't help but ask. Yili smiled mildly, saying, "Tie hair as a pillow, friends in the Yellow Springs." Wei Lin was silent. In the eyes of those who were close to the prince and the princess, they always saw the infatuation and longing for the prince towards the princess. However, the princess always seemed to be indifferent to it. Now Wei Lin finally understood that the princess's feelings towards the prince was not inferior to the prince's feelings towards the princess. However, compared to the princess didn't like to talk about these things even more. So the princess would put in so much effort. As long as it was something that the prince wanted to do, the princess would almost never oppose it. She would just calmly do what she could do or quietly accompany the prince by his side. As for the rest of the questions, Wei Lin felt that he really didn't need to ask anymore. He just looked at Yili respectfully, saying, "Please tell me, princess." Yili stood up and smiled mildly, saying, "Let's wait and see. When Mo Jingli leaves, the Chu capital should also change." Outside Nanjing, Dongfang Yu was walking slowly in an ordinary woman's cotton dress. Beside her were 2 young men who were also wearing the same clothes. The group looked like 3 ordinary siblings who had just returned from the capital. When they reached an intersection, Dongfang Yu stopped. A trace of murderous intent flashed across her beautiful face. She said mildly, "Get rid of those annoying flies behind." "Yes, young master." The two men replied respectfully. They turned around and disappeared by the side of the road. Dongfang Yu stood by the side of the road for a long while before she smiled mildly. She turned around and walked towards another path that was completely opposite. On the quiet path, the man in the cotton dress neatly took back the blood-stained software. He returned to his original simple and honest appearance of an ordinary person. He looked mildly at the corpses on the ground. He shook his head and turned around to leave. After a while, two men in black appeared beside the corpses. They looked down at the corpses whose blood had not dried. They kicked them and said somewhat helplessly, "We lost them." The other man said, "We lost them, but that doesn't mean that others lost them." Since they couldn't be too close, there would naturally be more people following them. The man in black sighed, saying, "Let's go back and report to young master first. These people from the infinite boundless mountain are really something. There's no need." A faint voice came from behind. A handsome young man in white walked over with two black-robed men. The two hurriedly went forward to pay their respects, "Young master." Yili smiled mildly, "You don't have to take it to heart. If the people of Infinite Boundless Mountain don't even have this bit of ability, how would they have the ability to snatch someone from King Ding's estate without anyone noticing? Let's go. Young master already knows the whereabouts of young master Qinchin. We'll know when we get there." Yili said mildly. The place where the eastern secluded mountain hid people was indeed not easy to find. Even though Yili seemed to know the route, they still had to take a long detour through the mountains near the capital. They only stopped when they reached an unremarkable hunter's hut in the mountains. Shuajing frowned, saying, "This doesn't seem like a place where young master Qinchin could be locked up." Although there were few people in these mountains, there were still the occasional hunters and farmers going in and out. Young Master Qinchin's appearance was really too easy to attract attention. For such a divine young master like young Master Qinchin to reside in such a place, the news would have long since spread. The people of the infinite boundless mountain also couldn't possibly silence everyone who entered the mountains. That would only attract even more attention. Yili smiled and pointed at that hut, saying, "Look at that hut. Do you see anything wrong with it?" Shuajing and Wei Lin both looked over, but couldn't see anything wrong with it even after looking for a while. Yili smiled mildly, saying, "Looking at the hut, I'm afraid that it's already been here for a few decades. But, look at that chimney." The two looked over, and then suddenly realized. Wei Lin said, "It seems that no one has ever used the chimney." Yili nodded and smiled, saying, "Even if this hut is only occasionally used by hunters, it's impossible for them to never use the kitchen stove, unless there's another world inside. But, how are we going to investigate? There might be someone in this hut." Shuajing said. Yili said in a low voice, "We haven't confirmed whether Big Brother is here. It's indeed not good to act rashly and alert the enemy. But if we don't want to alarm anyone." This hut was really too small. It was impossible to go in and investigate without alerting the people in the hut. After thinking about it, Yili decided to wait first. At the same time, she pondered in her heart what secret was hidden under the hut. Was it a secret passage, or an underground palace? There had to be a suitable place to hide someone. Yili believed that with Dongfang Yu's feelings for Su Qinchin, he would definitely not casually hide her in a cave. After waiting for a long time, they finally saw the door of the hut open from the inside. After a while, Dongfang Yu walked out with a sullen face. Even though they were far away, the three of them could still feel that Dongfang Yu's expression was very ugly. The men and women behind her were even more silent. Yi Li's heart suddenly had a bad premonition. Dongfang Yu's palm landed on a middle-aged man who was speaking in a panic. Before the man could say anything, he spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground, dead. Clearly, something had happened that made her extremely angry. Dongfang Yu happened to be facing their direction. Yi Li could tell what she was saying from her slightly moving lips. A bunch of trash. You can't even watch someone who doesn't know martial arts. What do I need you for? Yi Li was shocked. Could it be that Big Brother had escaped? If so, why didn't Big Brother contact them? The subordinates were clearly trying hard to explain something. Other than the two men who came with Dongfang Yu, the others all knelt on the ground. But Dongfang Yu's anger had not subsided. She said coldly, "When did he disappear?" Yi Li naturally could not see the subordinates' answers. Yi Li lowered her eyes and thought for a moment. She asked, "Do you have any confidence in catching Dongfang Yu now?" Shuo Jing and Wei Lin looked at each other and said in a low voice, "Our people are already nearby. It shouldn't be a problem. It's just that Dongfang Yu's qigong seems to be very good. I'm just afraid that she will know that she is no match for us and will try to escape. It will be difficult for her to escape unscathed." Yi Li smiled faintly. "She's not anyone to us. Who wants you to escape unscathed? It's fine as long as she's not dead." "As you command," the two men said in unison. Outside the hunter's hut in the forest, Dongfang Yu said angrily and hurriedly, "Why aren't you looking for him? If you can't find young Master Qingchen in 3 days, be careful of your lives. There's no need to trouble Miss Dongfang's people with young Master Qingchen's whereabouts. Why don't Princess Li have a chat with me first?" On a hill not far away, a man's voice with a faint smile suddenly sounded. Chapter 898. There is no need to trouble Miss Dongfang's men with the whereabouts of young Master Qingchen. Why don't Princess Li have a chat with me first? On a hill not far away, a man's voice suddenly sounded with a faint smile. Hearing this, the faces of the people in front of the hut changed. Although this hut looked inconspicuous, there were many traps set up on the way here. They might not be able to hurt people, but once they touched the people in the hut, they would know immediately. However, this person had already quietly arrived in front of them without alerting anyone. "Who is it?" Dongfang Yu suddenly turned around and saw a man in black leaning against a tree at the bottom of a hill not far away, his arms crossed as he looked in her direction. Dongfang Yu thought for a moment and remembered the identity of this person, someone from the Prince Ding mansion. Although she did not know the name and identity of the man in front of her, Dongfang Yu still remembered that she had seen this person by Princess Ding's side. He was obviously Princess Ding's confidant. But she did not expect that while she was carefully guarding the Prince Ding mansion, Yi Li's confidant had already silently followed behind her. The man in black smiled and saluted. "Shuo Jing of the Prince Ding mansion greets Miss Dongfang." Dongfang Yu looked at him calmly and said, "What are you doing here? You can't be the only one who came to the Prince Ding mansion, right?" Shuo Jing said, "Whatever Miss Dongfang is doing here, I am here to do. I invite Miss Dongfang to come over for a chat." Dongfang Yu's face changed slightly and asked, "Yi Li is also here?" Shuo Jing smiled but did not speak. Dongfang Yu's mind was racing. She knew that the situation was not good for her. Last time, in order to catch Su Qingchen, the people she sent and Mo Jingli sent had both lost 70 to 80% of their men. One could imagine how powerful the guards of the Prince Ding mansion were, not to mention that Yi Li was personally in charge of the Prince Ding mansion's most elite Qilin. "I'm afraid I don't have the time to catch up with Princess Ding. If Princess Ding has any business, why don't you come to the Li Palace for a visit?" Dongfang Yu said lightly. Shuo Jing did not want to waste time talking to her. He smiled silently and raised his hand. Countless black figures appeared silently on the hills around the house. They blocked all the exits in a well-trained manner. It was impossible to escape even if one had wings. Dongfang Yu also understood that if he didn't make a move, he wouldn't be able to get out of the Prince Ding mansion. Without hesitation, he flew forward and pounced in Zhuo Jing's direction. The people who followed Dongfang Yu naturally did not hold back when they attacked her. A scuffle in the forest began. Zhuo Jing smiled as he looked at the woman who was charging towards him. He did not care and drew his sword. Although Dongfang Yu's martial arts might be higher than his, he was not afraid of her. The two of them were soon entangled in a fight. On a hill not far away, Yi Li and Wei Lin looked down at the chaotic battle below. Although Dongfang Yu and the people around him were good at martial arts, there were not many of them. This place was very secluded. It was only a place that Dongfang Yu used to hide people. Naturally, there would not be too many people guarding it. In just a moment, Dongfang Yu's people were at the bottom. Princess, this Dongfang Yu's martial arts are really good. If not for the fact that there is something wrong with her head, Dongfang Yu can really be called a genius. Wei Lin could not help but praise. It was originally more difficult for women to practice martial arts than men. Dongfang Yu was only 16 or 17 years old and already had such profound martial arts. In terms of talent, she was not much worse than Mo Xiuya when he was young. If all went well, she might become another martial arts genius after Mo Xiuya. She might also become the first woman to obtain the title of the #1 expert in the world. Looking at the woman who was exchanging blows with Zhuo Jing, and even suppressing him, Yi Li could not help but nod and praise. The successor of the infinite boundless mountain is indeed a rare genius. Dongfang Yu was not only good at martial arts. She was also good at music, chess, calligraphy, painting, poetry, singing, dancing, astrology, and medicine. Yi Li knew that she could not be such a genius. But at the same time, the thinking of a genius was different from that of an ordinary person. Her thinking was obviously not something that an ordinary person could accept. Should I go and help? Wei Lin asked. It was not that Zhuo Jing could not deal with Dongfang Yu. Even if Dongfang Yu was a genius, she still lacked experience. There was a difference between her and someone like Ren Qining who had been honed for a long time. If Zhuo Jing wanted to kill Dongfang Yu, he would have at least 3 to 5 chances to do so. But it would be difficult to catch her. No need, Yi Li shook her head and said with a smile, she can't run. Let's go down too. Dongfang Yu had no way to escape. But the one who gave her the fatal blow was not Zhuo Jing or the people of the Prince Ding mansion, but one of the guards who had always been by Dongfang Yu's side. When all of Dongfang Yu's subordinates had been taken down and only that guard was left, when that person rushed over to block Zhuo Jing's sword for her, Dongfang Yu thought that she had found a chance to escape. But she did not expect to be greeted by 2 swords. She dodged Zhuo Jing's sword, and it only scratched her clothes a little. But the sudden attack from the young man whom she had never been on guard against seriously injured her. Clutching her chest, Dongfang Yu glared hatefully at the young man standing beside Zhuo Jing. What else did she not understand? You are from the Prince Ding mansion. Zhuo Jing said with a smile, if the infinite boundless mountain can plant people in the Prince Ding mansion, how can the Prince Ding mansion not plant people in the infinite boundless mountain? In the end, she was still too inexperienced. Even though Dongfang Yu had the highest level of martial arts in the world, she had no choice but to be controlled by others. Seeing Yi Li strolling over with Wei Lin, the anger in Dongfang Yu's eyes grew. Yi Li, it really is you. Yi Li said with a smile, I didn't want to appear here at first, but Miss Dongfang forced me to come. Since we are already here, why don't we go inside and have a seat? At this time, there was no room for Dongfang Yu to speak. Her martial arts were controlled, and she was forced to follow Yi Li into the small wooden hut beside. The small wooden hut was indeed a different world. The Prince Ding Mansion's methods were naturally able to pry open these people's mouths. Especially after seeing with their own eyes how Dongfang Yu had casually killed their comrade, these people could not help but feel a sense of sympathy. Compared to the unpredictable, temperamental and ruthless Dongfang Yu, Ding Wang Fei, who was dressed in white and had a gentle smile on her face, appeared especially amiable. Xue Jing and Wei Lin used less than 7 minutes to obtain the entrance to the secret passage from these people. Escorting Dongfang Yu in front, they walked for about an hour before they finally saw the light of day again. This place was actually a deep valley surrounded by cliffs and precipitous cliffs. Although Yili had a rough idea of this place based on the terrain and route in the secret passage before. But when she really saw such a place, she could not help but frown. In such a place, not to mention Su Qingchen, who did not know any martial arts, even Yili herself would not be able to leave this place without alerting anyone. Moreover, Su Qingchen did not know any Qinggong, and with his physical strength, it would be very difficult for him to climb up the cliff that was close to 1,000 feet high. How did Big Brother disappear from here? Chapter 899. When did young Master Qingchen go missing? Yili asked indifferently as they sat in a simple building in the valley. Looking at the furnishings in the building, although it was simple, there was not a single thing missing. There was a half-read ancient book on the table, and Su Qingchen's room was also neat and tidy. It did not look like someone had broken in and kidnapped Su Qingchen. The men and women looked at each other, and one of them came forward and said, reporting to Princess, young Master Qingchen went missing 2 days ago. 2 days ago. Yili raised her eyebrows. Since young Master Qingchen went missing 2 days ago, why didn't you report it to Miss Dongfang? Did you send people to look for him? The man smiled bitterly. We sent people to look for him at that time, but they did not find him in the valley, outside the valley, on the mountain and at the foot of the mountain. Young Master ordered us to look after young Master Qingchen. Now that young Master Qingchen has gone missing, we are really... Yili understood their thoughts. These people had followed Dongfang Yu for some time, and probably knew Dongfang Yu's methods. Princess Xixia had only ridiculed Dongfang Yu with a few words, and she was almost beaten to death by Dongfang Yu, not to mention that these people had lost Su Qingchen. They could only drag it out. Who knows, they might find him before Dongfang Yu came. Yili glanced at Dongfang Yu, who was sitting stiffly at the side. In such a short time, Dongfang Yu could grow into a master that made her subordinates tremble with fear. It was really unexpected. However, now that she had caught him, it was no big deal. The infinite boundless mountain was a nail that had been buried in the various countries for hundreds of years. Sooner or later, it would be completely eradicated. In this valley, other than the secret passage, is there any other way out? Yili asked. Everyone shook their heads, and the leader smiled bitterly. Princess, even if there is a way out, it is not something young Master Qingchen can get out of. You have to climb out of this cliff. But look at the cliff on all sides. It's as if it was carved by a knife. Not to mention young Master Qingchen, who doesn't know martial arts, even people like us. Yili nodded. If she didn't use any tools, even Yili wouldn't be able to climb up such a cliff. What was young Master Qingchen doing before he went missing? Because young Master ordered us not to neglect young Master Qingchen, so as long as young Master Qingchen doesn't run away, he can do whatever he wants. Young Master Qingchen has been very well behaved. Every day, he just reads books and plays the zither. So we didn't pay much attention to it. Every day at that time, young Master Qingchen would sit on the hillside outside the house and read a book. Yili stood up and said, "Take me there." Now that these people's lives were in Yili's hands, they naturally wouldn't go against Yili. What's more, if Yili hadn't suddenly appeared with people, with Dongfang Yu's anger at that time, they might have died like the unlucky ones who died first. So in a way, Princess Ding could be said to have saved their lives. What's more, no matter from which point of view, pledging loyalty to the Prince Ding mansion was much better than continuing to follow this already ruined boundless mountain. Yili smiled and looked at Dongfang Yu. Dongfang Yu stared back at Yili without showing any weakness. That gaze seemed to be dipped in poison. Yili frowned and said indifferently, "Miss Dongfang, I'll have to trouble you to stay here for a while." Dongfang Yu stared at her and said, "I want to go with you to find young Master Qing Qin." Yili frowned, "Big brother won't want to see you. Haven't you harmed him enough?" Dongfang Yu said angrily, "I didn't harm young Master Qing Qin. I just. Yili waved her hand and said, "I don't want to hear what you just said. Just tell me if you want to stay here obediently." Dongfang Yu stared at her provocatively and said, "So what if I don't want to? If you have the ability, tie me up." Yili's lips curled up in a smile, "If that's the case." She raised her hand and a hand knife cleanly cut Dongfang Yu's neck. Dongfang Yu closed her eyes and fell to the ground. Wei Lin. Wei Lin looked at Yili with admiration and nodded with a smile, "Princess, don't worry. I guarantee that she won't cause any trouble." The Prince Ding mansion had many methods and drugs to block internal energy, ensuring that even if Dongfang Yu woke up, she would be limp and unable to move at all. After leaving Dongfang Yu, the group was led by those people to the place where Su Qingchen disappeared. It was indeed the place with the best scenery in the entire valley. There was a smooth stone on the ground. Compared to the stones in other places, this stone was exceptionally clean. It was obvious that someone often wiped it or sat on it. Yili sat down on the stone and looked around. She asked, "Where is the book that Big Brother was reading that day?" Everyone looked at each other. After a while, they said, "It seems that it disappeared with young Master Qing Qin." Young Master Qing Qin had already caused a ruckus. How could he have the time to care about an unremarkable book? Now that they thought about it, young Master Qing Qin came out with a book. But after that, they did not see the book nearby. This meant that when young Master Qing Qin left, he took the book with him. Shuo Jing whispered to Yili, "It seems like Master Qing Qin wasn't forced by anyone. Instead, he left on his own accord. If he was forced by someone, he wouldn't have been so meticulous as to not forget to take a book with him. If young Master Qing Qin was taken away unconsciously, it was even more impossible. It could not be that the person who took young Master Qing Qin suddenly saw the ancient book and liked it so much that he took it with him." Yili pondered for a long time. Finally, she pointed to the cliff in front of her and said, "Go up and take a look." Then she pointed to the lake not far away and said, "Go down and take a look." Immediately, a few guards in black walked to the cliff and began to climb up the cliff. Another 2 guards, who were good at swimming, slid into the water and sank silently. "Princess, young Master Qing Qin should not." A few guards who were originally guarding Su Qingchen thought that Yili thought that Su Qingchen had fallen into the lake. They hurriedly tried to persuade her. If young Master Qingchen really fell into the lake, his body should have floated to the surface in these 2 days. Yili waved her hand to indicate that they did not need to say more. After a while, the guards who had climbed up the cliff came down. "Princess, there are footprints on the mountain." But young Master Qing Qin did not go up the cliff. It would take a lot of time and effort to bring someone who did not know martial arts up such a high cliff. Moreover, the chances of being discovered by the people below were too high. Moreover, there were no traces left on the stone wall or the cliff. Unless the other party was good enough to bring young Master Qing Qin up the cliff in one breath and fly further without using any force. However, even a prince would not be able to achieve such a level of skill. Yili sighed slightly. She did not have much hope at first. After waving the guards away, Yi silently stared at the rippling lake. Chapter 900. After a long time, the guard who had gone down before finally poked his head out from the bottom of the lake. He said with surprise, "Your Highness, there is a very deep karst cave at the bottom of the lake. I suspect that it can lead to the outside." Wei Lin frowned and said, "But even so, Master Qinchin can't go out." Looking at the two guards, he knew that they were almost out of breath. Master Qinchin's body couldn't be more suffocating than the guards of the Prince Ding mansion. What's more, did Master Qinchin know how to swim? Yi Li's eyebrows relaxed slightly and said, "My eldest brother naturally didn't leave by himself." "Your Highness, do you mean that someone took Master Qinchin away?" Shuo Jing asked. One of the guards who was still soaking in the lake raised a jade pendant and said, "Your Highness, I found this at the bottom of the lake." Wei Lin stepped forward and took it. It was indeed the jade pendant that Su Qinchin usually wore. The silk ribbon that tied the jade pendant was not broken, but the jade pendant was found in the lake. Obviously, someone deliberately threw it there. Holding the jade pendant, Yi Li thought for a while and asked, "Can you go through?" "I'm incompetent. I'm afraid. I've swam very far, but I still can't feel the location of the exit. And this is the mountain. Even if there is an exit, I'm afraid it's not enough." The guard apologized. Yi Li waved her hand and said, "How can I blame you? You can get up first." Wei Lin, send people to secretly investigate all the places within a radius of 5 li, record down all the places with ponds and rivers. Shuo Jing, see if there are any people who live by the sea who can dive for a long time. Let them try from here. Yes, Your Highness. The two men said in unison. Originally, they thought that they had news of Su Qinchin, but they didn't expect to be happy for nothing. But at least they had news of Su Qinchin. Although Yi Li was worried about Su Qinchin's safety, she could only return to the city first. But at this time, because of Dongfang Yu's sudden disappearance, Nanjing City was turbulent. The Prince Li's mansion sent people to search everywhere. Yi Li was still walking on the street with Shuo Jing and Wei Lin, who had disguised themselves. On the other hand, Dongfang Yu had been sent back to the Chu mansion in the city. Yi Li did not intend to use Dongfang Yu as a chess piece now. It was not a good thing to alert the enemy. When Mo Jingli left Nanjing, Dongfang Yu and Mountain would be much more useful. Dongfang Yu was brought back to the Chu mansion in a box. Mo Jingli, who was frantically looking for Dongfang Yu, naturally did not expect that Dongfang Yu would be unconsciously put in a box and brought back to Nanjing like goods when Dongfang. Opening the box, Dongfang Yu had already woken up. So even if she woke up, she could only curl up in the box and wait helplessly for someone to let her out. Dongfang Yu's life was smooth. Except for the time when Su Qinchin couldn't get what she wanted and when she was forced to marry Mo Jingli, Dongfang Yu had never been wronged, let alone treated like this. So, as soon as the box was opened, Wei Lin felt Dongfang Yu's sharp gaze. Wei Lin shrugged. He picked Dongfang Yu up and threw her into the chair next to him. Dongfang Yu glared at the person on the main seat angrily. But when she saw the handsome man sitting on the main seat, she was stunned. "It's you." Yi Li smiled faintly and nodded. "Miss Dongfang, you've been wronged." It was Chu Junwei, but it was Yi Li's voice. Dongfang Yu's face suddenly became very ugly. She gritted her teeth and said, "Yi Li, it's you. How dare you?" Master Chu, whom she liked at the Chrysanthemum Appreciation Party, was actually Yi Li in disguise. This was absolutely more embarrassing for Dongfang Yu than anything else. But at this time, she didn't have the time to care about Yi Li's trick. She asked hurriedly, "Where is Master Qingqin?" Yili shook her head helplessly. Dongfang Yu's feelings for Su Qingqin were definitely deep. Unfortunately, she used the wrong method. And Su Qingqin really didn't have any thoughts about her. It was never a matter of one person to want two people to love each other. If Dongfang Yu only wanted to silently hinder Su Qingqin and not interfere with anyone else, Yili naturally wouldn't mock her feelings. However, if the other party had already rejected him in a righteous manner, it would be too much to force him to do anything if he continued to pester him or even use all sorts of methods. The Prince Ding mansion will take care of Big Brother's matter. If Miss Dongfang has time, you should think about yourself. Yili said calmly. I want to see Master Qingqin. Dongfang Yu screamed. Yili frowned and said, we haven't found Big Brother yet. I want to see Master Qingqin. Dongfang Yu continued to scream as if she didn't hear Yili's words. Yili sighed helplessly, there's nothing to talk about. Miss Dongfang, please go and rest. Yili. I want to see Master Qingqin. Dongfang Yu glared at Yili, as if she was an evil mother-in-law who broke up an affectionate couple. Yili looked at her with a frown and asked faintly, Miss Dongfang, these days, have you thought of Madame Dongfang? Dongfang Yu was slightly shocked and her face suddenly turned pale. Yili waved her hand and asked someone to take her away. Perhaps because Yili suddenly mentioned Dongfang Hui, Dongfang Yu was taken away in a daze. Princess, I didn't expect that you would bring back such an amazing person. At the door, Yaoji stood at the door and looked at Yili with a smile. Yili raised her eyebrows slightly and looked at Yaoji, who came in person. She said, why are you here? Yaoji smiled and said, Prince Li is looking for someone all over the city. I know something big must have happened. But I didn't expect that Princess Li was missing. Yili was a little curious, didn't Imo Jingli announce this? Yaoji covered her mouth and smiled, I'm afraid that Imo Jingli has already determined that Dongfang Yu escaped with Master Qingqin. Why would he announce it and embarrass himself? I'm afraid that he would never expect that the princess regent he is looking for is in the Chu mansion, which is not far from Prince Li's mansion. How is it? Is there any news of Master Qingqin? Yili frowned slightly and shook her head. Yaoji sighed softly and said, Princess, don't worry. Master Qingqin is a good person. Nothing will happen to him. By the way, I came here in person for a proper business. Yili looked at her with a smile. Yaoji waved the invitation in her hand and said with a smile, Prince Li is going to go to war, but he is a little short of military funds. So he wants to invite the rich and powerful people in the city to a banquet and borrow money from everyone. Yili was stunned and said after a while, so, Mo Jingli wants to borrow money from me to attack the Mahist army? Yaoji smiled and said, who asked the Chu family to be a famous family in the Chu state? Chapter 901. The Chu family was indeed a famous family in the Chu state. Unfortunately, Yili was not a member of the Chu family. What's more, the Chu family's headquarters in Yunzhou was still under the control of Enchanting. Why would the Chu family give money to Mo Jingli to attack the Prince Ding mansion? With the relationship between the Chu family and the Su family, it might be more reliable for the Prince Ding mansion to raise money to attack Mo Jingli. Yaoji helplessly stuffed the invitation into Yili's hands, saying, I didn't want to come to you with such a funny thing. But the regent handed this matter over to the Marquis Muyang's mansion. The Marquise in our mansion has been throwing a tantrum recently, so I had to come here personally. I also came to ask about young Master Qingqin. It's not easy for me to walk into your mansion openly. Yili looked at the invitation in her hands with a smile, saying calmly, it seems that Mo Jingli really trusts the Marquis Muyang's mansion. Yaoji pursed her lips, saying, old Marquis Muyang is a man who swings with the wind. He naturally knows what to do and what not to do. After Mo Jingli passed away, the Marquis Muyang's mansion immediately leaned towards Mo Jingli. Although the Marquis Muyang's mansion had some conflicts with Prince Li in the past, Marquis Muyang has helped Prince Li a lot in the past 2 years. What's more, he has taken the initiative to withdraw and pass the title to Mo Jingli. Mo Jingli has to do something. Otherwise, how can he appease the old officials of Mo Jingqi? Yili thought it made sense. She gently patted the invitation in her hands, saying, I know. Go back and tell Marquis Muyang that Chu Junwei will definitely be on time for the banquet. Yaoji looked at her curiously. You're not really planning to help Mo Jingli raise money for the army, are you? Yili smiled but did not say anything. Instead, she asked, I'm a little curious. Why is Mo Jingli short of money? In the past few years, the Dechu state had not suffered from any disasters, nor had it sent troops abroad. A few years ago, when Mo Jingli moved south, he emptied the Dechu state's treasury. Of course, most of that money went into Mo Jingli's private vault. Yili once thought that Mo Jingli might be one of the richest people in the world. Yaoji shrugged, I don't know about that. However, I'm afraid the Dechu state's treasury didn't have much money. Didn't the Dechu state go to war several times in a row? The most tragic thing was that they were defeated in every battle. In the end, they even lost Chu Jing. Furthermore, even if Mo Jingli has the money, he may not be willing to use it to pay the soldiers. Hearing this, Yili could not help but smile. I didn't expect Mo Jingli to have the habit of being a miser. Speaking of which, among the nobles, the Prince Ding mansion was the most powerful. However, Prince Ding and Princess Ding themselves were not very rich. The wealth under the Prince Ding mansion's name was naturally incalculable. However, Yili and Mo Xiuyao did not have the temperament to accumulate wealth. Therefore, their private vaults added up to no more than 400,000 to 500,000 taels of silver. It seemed a lot, but compared to the other nobles, it was not enough. Yaoji did not stay any longer. She stood up and smiled. Since the invitation has been delivered, Yaoji will take her leave. Yili also knew that many things in the Marquis Muyang's mansion were handled by Yaoji. Yili stayed a little longer and smiled faintly. Be careful. Outside Nanjing City, in a deep mountain dozens of miles away, a few simple thatched cottages were located between the mountains and rivers. They were almost integrated with the trees and flowers in the mountains. If one did not walk close, one would not be able to see that there were people living in this deserted place. In front of the thatched cottages, there were a few small herbal fields. There were many commonly used herbs in the fields. Although it was the beginning of winter, many of the herbs had dried up and looked a little sparse. However, those that were still alive were well taken care of. The entire herbal field was clean and orderly. In the cottage, a handsome young man leaned against the window and sat on the bed. He was casually flipping through an ancient book in his hand. With a faint smile on his lips, he looked like an immortal. Who else could it be but Master Qingchen, who was almost searched inside and outside Nanjing City by the Mahist army but could not find. After reading for a while, Master Qingchen raised his head and glanced outside. The smile on his lips was a little more helpless. There was a dull pain in his chest, so he could only suppress the idea of getting out of bed and walking for a while. Who would have thought that the handsome and talented young Master Qingchen would have such bad luck? There was a light sound of footsteps outside the door. A girl in cotton clothes came in from outside, holding a bamboo basket full of various herbs. Seeing the person leaning against the bed, she quickly put down the bamboo basket and came forward to inquire, Su Qingchen, why are you sitting up? Are you better? The girl was only 15 or 16 years old. Her beautiful hair was just casually tied with a thin string similar to the cloth on her clothes. She was wearing a light green coarse dress. Her dress was even worse than that of a typical village girl. However, such a coarse dress could not hide the girl's beauty. Her light pink lips were red without any makeup, her exquisite nose, and her clear eyes seemed to be able to see through people's hearts. Although she was still young, it was difficult to hide the girl's peerless beauty. However, at this moment, this lovable girl was frowning and looking apologetically at Master Qinchin on the bed. "Su Qinchin. Are you better? It's all my fault." Su Qinchin looked helplessly at the girl who was about to cry. He softly comforted her. "How can I blame you? Speaking of which, you saved me. But if I didn't insist on taking you away, you wouldn't have been injured," the girl said guiltily. When she went up the mountain to pick herbs, she heard the pleasant sound of a zither and followed it. Seeing a godlike person playing the zither in the valley, she remembered that her father had left her a zither when he was alive. She didn't know how to play it, so she quietly went down the valley to ask for advice. When she heard that the godlike master was actually imprisoned there, she wanted to save him. However, she didn't expect that she would accidentally cause him to be seriously injured underwater. If she had known, she wouldn't have brought him out. Anyway, those people seemed to be very good to him. That won't do. I'd rather be injured than leave that place. So, I still want to thank you. What's more, aren't you already treating my injuries?" Su Qinchin smiled faintly. Although he was sure that the people from the Prince Ding mansion would come to save him, he didn't know when exactly. Sometimes, even if one was a little bit late, they would still be in big trouble. Master Qinchin had been away from home for decades and had been safe. In addition to having a wide circle of friends, he was the best at judging the situation. Instead of meeting with that crazy woman, Dong Fangyu, he would rather be injured and come out first. It had to be said that this was the first time in his life that Master Qinchin secretly regretted that he didn't know martial arts. The girl nodded repeatedly, and her bright and beautiful face suddenly burst into a smile. Yes, I'll be able to cure you soon. My medical skills are very good. The doctors in the city all say that the medicine I make is very effective. Su Qinchin, I bought some good medicine from the city and just made it. You can eat it." The girl took out a small wooden bottle and presented it to him as if it was a treasure. She blinked her big eyes and looked at him eagerly. Su Qinchin smiled helplessly, reached out to take the medicine bottle and opened it. A refreshing fragrance immediately wafted out of the small bottle. A milky white pill was poured out of the bottle. Su Qinchin put it in his mouth and it melted immediately. In a moment, he only felt that the discomfort all over his body reduced a lot. There were only 5 pills in the small bottle. Although Su Qinchin was not proficient in medical skills, he was quite knowledgeable. Naturally, he could find that these small pills must cost a lot of medicinal materials. Chapter 902. The girl always thought that she had caused Su Qinchin's injury and felt guilty. In fact, Su Qinchin was much more important than her. Originally, the girl only wanted to ask for guidance on the zither. Perhaps she was lonely living alone in the mountains and wanted to talk to someone. The girl always thought that she wanted to meddle in other people's business to save Su Qinchin. In fact, if not for Su Qinchin's deliberate words, this child who had not yet grown up would not have thought of this. However, the injury was indeed out of Su Qinchin's expectations. The girl in front of him took care of him carefully, wanting to heal Su Qinchin as soon as possible. After spending time together, Su Qinchin already knew that the girl had lived in the mountains with her father since she was young. After her father passed away 3 years ago, she lived alone. Occasionally, she would take some herbs and simple pills that she grew and sell in the city to exchange for daily necessities. This time, in order to treat Su Qinchin's injuries, the young girl had used up all the silver that her father had saved for many years when he was still alive. She had also gone deep into the mountains to find some precious medicinal herbs that ordinary people would not be able to guess in exchange for the medicinal herbs needed for the treatment. Therefore, every time he met the girl's guilty eyes, Su Qingchen felt that he was really a bastard for the first time in his life. Yungu, come and sit down. Su Qingchen waved at the girl. The girl named Yungu blinked and walked to a stool not far from Su Qingchen's bed and sat down obediently. Su Qingchen asked softly, Yungu, did anything happen in the city today? Yungu blinked and said, I heard from the people in the city that there's going to be a war. A war? Su Qingchen frowned slightly. The Dechu state's only opponent south of the Yunlan River was Enchanting, Genom of Gojoseon of Xiling. But logically, Enchanting would not use force against the Dechu state now. With whom? Yungu pouted and said, with the Mahist army. My father said that the Mahist army are good people and Prince Li wants to fight with them. Prince Li is a bad person. Su Qingchen raised her eyebrows and asked, why did your father say that Prince Ding is a good person? Yungu thought for a while and said, my father said that the Prince Ding mansion was devoted to the country and was loyal and courageous. Unfortunately, his achievements were too high to be tolerated by his superiors, so Prince Ding died young. My father said that the people in the Prince Ding mansion are all good people. As he spoke, he nodded heavily to show his agreement. Su Qingchen then understood that Yun Ji's father should be the former Prince Ding, Mo Lufang or Mo Xiuwen. He just didn't know who the hermit who had passed away early was. Since he could teach Yunj such profound medical skills and martial arts, he should not be an ordinary person. Alright, Prince Ding is a good person. Is there any more news? I asked you to check on the Chu estate in the city. Is there any movement? Yungu nodded and said, I've been watching for a long time. There are always people going in and out. But there are many experts in the estate, so I don't dare to go near. But I saw a very good-looking white-clothed young master. There was also a very beautiful elder sister who went in. White-clothed young master. Su Qingchen was deep in thought. Li He actually came personally. Yungu looked at him doubtfully and said, you want to find that white-clothed young master? I'll help you find him tomorrow. Also, there are many people looking for something in the nearby mountains. When I came back, I was almost discovered by them. I went to that valley today and there was no one there. But don't worry, no one can find us here. Don't be afraid. Su Qingchen was a little helpless. He was afraid that this place was too secretive. Not only could no one find him, even the people sent by Li to find him could not find him. But this was also good. He could not move for a while. It was better for everyone not to find him than to be found by the enemy. Su Qingchen, can you teach me how to play the zither? Yungu looked at Su Qingchen and said softly. Su Qingchen raised his eyebrows and smiled. Okay, didn't I promise you before? When I've recovered, I'll teach you how to play the zither. Yungu looked at him. Shouldn't you leave when you've recovered? I'm playing now. Can you help me take a look? Actually, I've learned a little. It's all my fault. When father taught me in the past, I refused to learn properly. In the end, father, no one taught me. Looking at the anticipation and sadness in the girl's eyes, Su Qingchen's heart paused slightly. He smiled faintly and said, why does Yungu want to learn how to play the zither? The sound of the zither is very nice. I can play it for myself. Yungu said with a smile. Su Qingchen sighed slightly. This Yunji's father was a little too relaxed. When he passed away, Yungu was only a 12 or 13-year-old girl. Even if she had martial arts, it was too lonely to live alone in this deep mountain. However, with this little girl's appearance and temperament, if there were no close relatives to look after her, it would be safer for her to live in this uninhabited place. However, this little girl had lived here for a few years and had never thought of leaving. Usually, she would only go into the city once a month to exchange for some daily necessities. For the past few years, she had followed her father's instructions before he passed away and only brought some common herbs and medicine to repay the debt. Otherwise, with her medical skills, she would have become famous long ago. Su Qingchen lowered his eyes and thought for a moment before asking, Yungu, don't you plan to leave this place? Yungu looked at him blankly, why should I leave this place? Father said that there are a lot of bad people out there. Even a good-looking person like Su Qingchen had been captured. If she were to leave this place, she would definitely be captured by bad people. Back then, not long after her father passed away, Yungu had encountered several robbers when she first entered the city alone. Fortunately, Yunji's martial arts were not bad and it was easy for her to get rid of these people. After that, Yungu knew to cover up her appearance every time she entered the city. However, if she were to leave this place, she could not possibly cover her face with dust every day, right? Although she was born in the countryside, it was a girl's nature to love beauty. Yungu did not want to be dirty every day. Su Qingchen was helpless. He could not help but raise his hand to knock her on the head. However, he accidentally pulled on his own injury and frowned in pain. Yungu quickly jumped up and pressed him back, don't move around. Your injury hasn't healed yet. Su Qingchen looked at her and said, it's not a long-term plan for a girl like you to stay in the mountains. Why don't you come with me to Glass City? Yungu was stunned for a moment before she finally shook her head. She said, no, father said that he wants me to stay here. Someone will come and pick me up in the future. Pick you up? Who? Did your father say when he would come and pick you up? Su Qingchen suddenly realized. It was impossible for Yunji's father to not consider his daughter's future. However, it had been 3 years and there was still no news. Would the other party really keep his promise and come? Yungu thought for a moment and said with some confusion, Father wrote a letter and asked me to send it out. Someone will come and pick me up. However, no one has come. What a silly girl. The letter had been sent out for 3 years and no one came. It was either that the other party did not receive the letter or they did not intend to come at all. Su Qingchen smiled faintly and said, how about this? You come back with me and we will leave a letter here. If someone comes to pick you up, they can go to Glass City to find you. When I return, I will also send someone to see if anyone comes here. Moreover, didn't you say that my internal injury will take a long time to heal? You can go and help me treat my injury, right? Chapter 903. Yungu looked at him awkwardly. She really wanted to leave this place with Su Qingchen. Although she was not particularly fond of crowds, after having Su Qingchen accompany her to talk these days, she felt a little sad when she thought of being alone again. However, her father had instructed her to wait here for someone. She could not disobey. Seeing her hesitate, Su Qingchen's eyes flashed and he smiled. Do you still remember the address to send the letter? I'll get someone to help you find them. Perhaps they really did not receive the letter. Then wouldn't you have to wait here for the rest of your life? Yungu thought for a long time before finally nodding and telling him an address. Hearing this, Su Qingchen could not help but frown. Yungu saw that his complexion was not good and could not help but worry. Su Qingchen, what's wrong? Su Qingchen asked, is your surname Mu? Ah. My surname is not Mu. My father's surname is Shin, Yungu said in confusion. Did she not tell Su Qingchen her surname? Tilting her head, she thought for a moment. It seemed that she had indeed forgotten to tell him that her surname was Shin. If a person had lived alone for too long, their surname was probably not that important anymore. Then what is your mother's surname? Su Qingchen asked. Yungu said, my father said that my mother's surname was Li. Su Qingchen nodded, I know who your father is looking for. I can bring you there. When I've recovered, you can come with me. Yunji's eyes brightened, really? Su Qingchen smiled and nodded. Looking at the happy girl in front of him, he sighed softly in his heart. This was just a lonely child. The Chu estate, reporting to the princess, a servant has come to report that a girl was peeping outside just now. Wei Lin came in to report. Yili raised her eyebrows slightly, a girl. Wei Lin nodded, that girl's martial arts are not bad, but she does not have much experience. She only left after looking outside for most of the day. Yili smiled with interest. Whether it was Infinite Boundless Mountain or Mo Jingli, they would definitely not send an inexperienced girl to spy on the Chu estate. Did you see clearly what she looked like? She seemed to be 15 or 16 years old. However, I did not see her face clearly. Also, the person who followed her out of the city has already returned. Yili smiled and said, you lost him. Wei Lin nodded in shame. He felt that the Shadow Guard was becoming more and more out of hand recently. First, he lost young Master Qingchen. Now, he even lost a 15-year-old girl. It was a complete disgrace to Qilin. Yili smiled and said, that's enough. You don't have to scold them. Logically speaking, they would never lose sight of an inexperienced little girl. He ordered his men to search the area where the girl went missing. In addition, send people to keep an eye on that place. That little girl definitely won't point it out this time. Wei Lin nodded and said, yes, many thanks to Princess Consort's kindness. Yili shook her head and said, even so, I think Qilin still needs to learn something else. Yes, I will follow your orders. Yili smiled and said, we'll talk about this later. Do you think this little girl has something to do with Big Brother? Wei Lin lowered his eyebrows and thought for a while. He said, it is indeed very possible. Even Mo Jingli did not notice anything unusual about the Chu residence. Why would that little girl specially come to watch the Chu residence? Moreover, she appeared near where young Master Qingchen went missing. Perhaps this little girl is the one who saved young Master Qingchen. But, since young Master Qingchen was saved, why didn't he come back? Yili frowned and said, Big Brother is very likely to be seriously injured. Don't worry. Since Big Brother knows that we are here, there should be news soon. Yes. I will send people to keep an eye on that place. The Li Palace is very strict today. Soon, we will have to attend Mo Jingli's banquet. Princess Consort, it is better not to go out of the city personally. Wei Lin said. Yili nodded and sighed, that is the only way. Sure enough, Yili saw the little girl mentioned by Wei Lin at noon the next day. When she saw her, she could not help but feel happy. It was actually a little girl. She looked to be less than 16 years old. Most importantly, she had a pair of crystal clear eyes. Even someone like Yili could not help but feel ashamed when she saw them. Yungu was brought into the Chu residence by the people of the Prince Ding mansion. Originally, she was entrusted by Su Qingchen to meet Yili. However, Su Qingchen told her that she could not enter through the front door and be seen by others. Therefore, Yungu could only go to the backyard of the Chu residence and planned to climb over the wall. However, she did not know that there were many more guards in the backyard of the Chu residence than the front door. Naturally, she was caught without any accident. Yungu looked at Yili curiously and asked, are you the Li, that Su Qingchen mentioned? Yili smiled and nodded, that's right, I am Li, Little girl, who are you? Yungu smiled, I'm Shin Yungu. I'm Su Qingchen's friend. You're very pretty, but why are you wearing men's clothes? Yili was a little surprised, you can tell that I'm a girl. Or did Big Brother tell you? Yili thought that she had dressed up very well. At least, no one had been able to see through her yet. At least, not this innocent little girl in front of her could. I'm a doctor, Shin Yun-guk said proudly, of course I can see. There are many differences between men and women. Yili smiled. It seemed that there was still a big difference between those who knew medicine and those who knew medicine. At least, the other person who claimed to be proficient in medicine did not see through her identity. Yili looked at the little girl in front of her and asked, "Is my big brother okay?" Hearing this, Shin Yun-ji's little face suddenly drooped. She said bitterly, "I'm sorry, it's all my fault. Su Qingchen was seriously injured. Don't worry, I know you saved Big Brother. Tell me what happened slowly," Yili comforted her softly. Shin Yun-guk told the story of her encounter with Su Qingchen in detail. Yili understood. Maybe it was an accident that Shin Yun-guk heard the zither at first, but it was no longer an accident when Shin Yun-guk ran into the valley to ask Big Brother to hand over the zither without alerting anyone. It would be too much to blame this little girl for what happened to Big Brother. Even Zhuo Jing and Wei Lin, who were standing behind Yili, had a strange look on their faces. They silently criticized in their hearts, is this the retribution of Mr. Qingchen for abducting an innocent girl? Yili patted Shin Yun-ji's little hand and smiled, "How can I blame you? I want to thank you for saving Big Brother." Shin Yun-guk was prepared to be scolded, but Yili's gentle behavior made Shin Yun-guk a little uncomfortable. She asked in a low voice, "Li, you don't blame me?" Yili smiled and said, "You don't have to be so polite. I'm a few years older than you. You can call me Sister Li, It's not your fault, so how can I blame you? What's more, you're a little girl and you brought Big Brother out from the bottom of the water. It's inevitable that you bumped into him." Yili was really a little surprised. How could Shin Yun-guk, who was so small, drag a big man out from the bottom of the water? Even if it was a big man, it would not be easy. Therefore, Mr. Qingchen's internal injuries were really light. It was good enough that he did not hit his head. Chapter 904. Yun-ji's eyes lit up. The only people she was familiar with since she was young were her father and mother. When she was at the foot of the mountain, she was very envious when she saw other people with older sisters. "Sister Li, good child." Yili lovingly patted her little head and smiled, "How is Big Brother's injury now?" Yun-guk said, "He will be able to move freely in a few days. But he can't move well for the next few days." I've said what Su Qingchen wanted me to say. I have to go back, otherwise he will be hungry." Yili smiled and nodded, "In that case, I will trouble you with Big Brother. I will send someone to treat him when he is better in a few days." Yun-guk shook her head and smiled, "It's no trouble. Su Qingchen will talk to me." "Very good. That's good. Wei Lin, send Miss Yun-guk out of the city. Also, if Big Brother needs any medicine, send it over as well." Yili turned her head and instructed. Wei Lin replied, "This subordinate obeys." Seeing Wei Lin take Yun-guk out, Yili couldn't help but laugh softly, "What an interesting little girl, isn't she?" Zhuo Jing nodded and said, "I really didn't expect that the one who took young Master Qingchen away was such a delicate little girl. Most importantly, this little girl's character is so clean and bright, which is rarely seen. Most importantly, there was actually such a beautiful little girl in the wilderness. Young Master Qingchen was really lucky. Why didn't Princess send someone to take care of young Master Qingchen?" Zhuo Jing smiled. Yili said lightly, "Since Miss Yun-guk has taken good care of Big Brother for so many days, it's okay to trouble her for a few more days." "What?" Zhuo Jing raised his eyebrows and smiled, "What does Princess mean?" Yili waved her hand and stood up. I don't mean anything. Big brother has been tired these few years. It's rare for him to have this opportunity. He should recuperate well. That little girl's personality was pure and simple. She didn't seem to be as polite as the other girls. Big brother allowed her to come to the Chu mansion because he trusted her. Since that was the case, she should stay well. You are right, princess. Yungu took many bags of things with her and was sent to a place not far from her home by the guards of the Prince Ding mansion before she went back. As soon as they entered, Su Qingchen looked at the little lass who was almost drowned by all kinds of boxes. She couldn't help but raise her eyebrows and smile. Since when did you like to go shopping? Yungu touched the sweat on her face and said with a puffed-up face, I didn't buy it. It was a gift from big sister Li. Su Qingchen looked at her with some amusement. They had only met once, and she was already calling her sister Li. What an unguarded little girl. While Yungu was busy putting all kinds of things on the table, she muttered softly, Su Qingchen, you're really a young master. It's just a few days, but you actually have to prepare so many things. Fortunately, Big Brother Imperial Bodyguard helped me carry them up the mountain. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to bring them all back for you by myself. Opening it, there were indeed many things. Su Qingchen needed all kinds of medicinal herbs and tonics to recuperate, as well as all kinds of books to pass the time. She also needed 3 or 4 sets of clothes. Even the matching jade pendant and so on were all prepared. Su Qingchen glanced at it and pointed to a box next to her. Open that and take a look. Yungu glanced at it curiously. This? She opened it and took a look. Inside was a light yellow exquisite women's dress. Yungu didn't know, but Su Qingchen didn't know. Just by looking at the outer shell of the box, she knew that it was the most famous women's dress in Nanjing City. Su Qingchen smiled and said, That's a gift from Li. You can try it. For me. Yungu was a little puzzled. She looked at the beautifully embroidered light yellow dress in the box and blinked her eyes. She was used to wearing plain cotton clothes. Although she had seen many girls wearing beautiful clothes when she went to the city, she had never envied them. Clothes, as long as they could be worn warm. But at this time, looking at the bright clothes, and then looking at Su Qingchen in a white dress who was looking at her with a smile, Yungu suddenly felt a little ashamed of her slovenly appearance. She picked up the box and hurried out. Su Qingchen smiled and looked at the little girl's figure disappearing at the door. She couldn't help but shake her head and laugh. Teasing children was really a very interesting thing. At the same time, Su Qingchen couldn't help but look forward to Yunji's appearance after putting on new clothes and dressing up seriously. As for Li, obviously didn't want him to intervene in the affairs of Nanjing City, let nature take its course. What's more, he was injured to the point where he couldn't even get up. If he went back, he would only drag her down. A mere Mo Jingli probably couldn't stop Li. Young Master Qingchen, who was in a happy mood, completely forgot that in a military camp in the north, there was a man who was anxiously looking forward to the return of his beloved wife. Su Qingchen, you'd better not come back for I. You still need Lili to go all the way to Jiangnan to find you. I must make you work like an ox for the Prince Ding mansion until the next life. Chapter 905. Su Qingchen. While Su Qingchen was deep in thought, Yunji's delicate figure was already standing outside the door. She looked at the handsome man inside hesitantly. Su Qingchen raised his head and looked at the girl in yellow at the door with a faint smile. Why don't you come in? The girl's delicate face was slightly red. She pulled her sleeves uncomfortably and looked at Su Qingchen eagerly. Su Qingchen smiled and praised, very pretty. but she was very pretty. The girl's delicate and small face did not have any makeup. Her slightly red face seemed to be dyed with light rouge and was as beautiful as a peach. There was a faint uneasiness in her bright eyes, which made her look even more lovable. Although Yili was not someone who liked to dress up, she had good taste. The light yellow robe was embroidered with light pink plum blossoms. A light-colored belt was tied around her willowy waist. Because it was already early winter, she even wore a light purple cloak with a white fox edge. The fluffy white fox fur around her neck made Yunji's petite face look even more exquisite and pretty, making it hard for people to take their eyes off her. Hearing Su Qingchen's praise, the girl's smile grew. Su Qingchen looked at the smiling girl not far away and could not help but be a little dazed. Nanjing City, Prince Regent's residence. The Prince Regent's residence was very lively today. As long as one had some reputation and ability, they would be invited to the Prince Regent's banquet. Although there were some people who did not look so happy. But now, the Prince Regent's residence held great power in Jiangnan and their words carried weight. Even if they did not like it, no one dared to go against the Prince Regent's wishes. Yili still brought Zhuo Jing and Wei Lin over. Wei Lin went forward and handed an invitation to the housekeeper at the door. The housekeeper looked at the elegant and handsome young master in front of him and could not help but secretly admire him. Although this young master Chu was from the north, he was handsome and elegant. Even in Jiangnan, the home of talents, there were few people who could compare to him. It was no wonder that Yunzhou was called the home of the wise. Stunned, the housekeeper quickly let people lead Yili and the others into the residence. This was Yili's first time coming to the Li Palace. Although she already knew the layout of the Li Palace like the back of her hand, it was different to actually enter it. The buildings in the northern lands were mostly about grandeur, while the buildings in Jiangnan were all about meticulous craftsmanship. Mo Jingli had always cared about his face, so the regent's residence was naturally the best residence in Nanjing. It was even comparable to the Prince Ding mansion in the Chu capital. From this, it could be seen just how strong Mo Jingli's desire to compete with Mo Xiuyao was. The banquet was held in a large hall in the center of the mansion. There were 9 rooms in this hall, and 5 rooms deep. The floor was paved with golden bricks, and the atmosphere was magnificent. The main entrance was inscribed with the name Taihua Hall. Yili, who was standing at the entrance of the main hall, raised her eyebrows and asked, "Why do I find this Taihua Palace Hall somewhat familiar?" Zhuo Jing laughed softly and said, "Young master, this is somewhat similar to the Qingjing Palace Hall in the Chu capital." No wonder young master finds it familiar. Yili suddenly understood. Actually, it was not that this Taihua Palace Hall was similar to the Qingjing Palace Hall. Qingjing Hall was a palace built by the founding emperor of the Chu capital. It was magnificent but did not lose the domineering aura of an emperor. On the other hand, this Taihua Palace was overly concerned with exquisite and luxurious decorations. The carvings and paintings on the walls were meticulously crafted. Instead, it fell behind and seemed somewhat petty. But the 9 doors and the mythological beast at the corner of the hall were no different from the Qingjing Palace Hall. 9 was the extreme number, and only the emperor could use it. Even in the main hall of Prince Ding's residence, the number was only 7. Mo Jingli's desire for the throne was not concealed in the slightest. Stepping into the hall, there were already many dignitaries sitting there. As soon as Yili entered, she saw Marquis Mu Yang and his son sitting at the front, and Yaoji sitting next to Mu Yang. Yaoji smiled and nodded at Yili. Mu Yang, who was sitting next to her, naturally turned his gaze over. He looked at Yili and then looked at Yaoji. Yaoji smiled and whispered a few words in Mu Yang's ear. Only then did Mu Yang nod at Yili. Yili indifferently returned the greeting. The servant who led the way led her to a seat and sat down. Although the Chu family was a famous family in the Chu state, they did not have much power in Nanjing City. So Yili's actions were not very important, but also not very important. With Chu Junwei's status, this seat was very flattering. As soon as Yili entered the hall, she attracted the attention of many people. Many people who didn't know her couldn't help but ask each other which family's young master was so elegant. "Are you Chu Junwei, young Master Chu?" The middle-aged man sitting next to Yili asked with a smile. Yili nodded and said, "May I know who you are?" The middle-aged man smiled and said, "My surname is Lin. I'm just a businessman. I can't compare to young Master Chu's family." Yili smiled and said, "Mr. Lin is too polite. The Lin family is the leader of the silk business in Jiangnan. Their family property is huge. I'm afraid that they are not below the richest people in the world. How can Chu Junwei's family be compared to them?" Yili's words were obviously to the middle-aged man's liking. Businessmen were rich but not expensive. They were always a bit envious and jealous of these scholars. These people said a good word about him, it was worth 100 words from ordinary people. "Ha, young Master Chu is too polite. We are all stink of money. How can we compare to young Master Chu?" Actually, this middle-aged man was not unfamiliar to Yili. Although they had never met before, Lin was one of the leading silk merchants in Jiangnan. Most of the silk that Li City transported to the western regions was traded with the Lin family. As the mistress of the Prince Ding mansion, Yili naturally would not be unaware of her business partners. "Mr. Lin is too kind. It's just that this time I was learning from Jiangnan. I didn't expect to meet Prince Li at this time. I'm from a branch family. How can I make decisions for the Chu family?" Yili sighed and frowned. When the middle-aged man heard this, he couldn't help but sigh and said, "Young master is right. It's a pity that Prince Li is in power. As the saying goes, the people do not fight with the officials. What can we, the common people, do?" He had a large business with the Prince Ding mansion. It could be said that it was because of the Prince Ding mansion's business that his Lin family was able to sit firmly in the top position in Jiangnan's silk business. If something happened to the Prince Ding mansion, what good would it do for the Lin family? Moreover, he didn't think highly of Prince Li at all. If it wasn't for the fact that the Lin family's silk business couldn't move in Jiangnan, he would have moved the Lin family to Li City a long time ago. Now it was great. Who didn't know that the Prince Ding mansion was well informed? If the Prince Ding mansion found out that he had donated money to Prince Li, the middle-aged man frowned and his expression became even more unsightly. Yili was sitting next to him. How could she not know what he was thinking? She then sighed helplessly and said, "Fortunately, my family is in Yunzhou. If I can immediately return to Yunzhou after today, there shouldn't be any problems. At most, I'll just give one of the side courtyards in Nanjing to the princely mansion. I'm sure that the Prince Ding mansion won't blame me for the Su family's sake." When he heard this, the middle-aged man was stunned for a moment. Then he suddenly became happy. He grabbed Yili and said with a smile, "Young master is going out. I'm sure you won't bring so many burdens. If there's anything you need, I'll do my best." Chapter 906. Yili calmly withdrew her hand and said with a faint smile, "How could I trouble Mr. Lin?" The middle-aged man smiled apologetically. How could it be a trouble? As the saying goes, rely on your parents at home and rely on your friends when you're out. This one also wants to be friends with Mr. Chu, but I'm afraid that Mr. Chu will dislike us businessmen for being vulgar. Yili smiled and suddenly felt that the person in front of her was somewhat interesting. After thinking for a while, she nodded and said with a smile, "I don't know how this one can repay Mr. Lin." The middle-aged man looked around cautiously and said with a smile, "Why don't we discuss this in private?" Yili said, "This one is only from a side branch of the Chu family. If I disappoint Mr. Lin when the time comes, wouldn't it be beautiful? The middle-aged man was helpless and could only laugh in a low voice. Actually, it's nothing. Mr. Chu is such a talent, this one doesn't believe that he has no influence in the Chu family. This one just wants to ask Mr. Chu to recommend Mr. Qin Chen or Mr. Han. When Prince Ding and Princess Ding were not in Glass City, Mr. Qin Chen was in charge of the Prince Ding mansion and Han Mingxi was in charge of the Prince Ding mansion's external business. No matter which one he recommended, he would not lose out. Yili lowered her eyes and said with a faint smile, so it's like this. It's just a small matter. Hearing this, the middle-aged man could not help but feel relieved. He could not help but think more highly of Yili. This was not a small matter. With his status, it was extremely difficult to meet Mr. Qin Chen. This Chu Junwei's relationship with Mr. Qin Chen must not be bad to have such confidence. Then, many thanks to Mr. Chu. The middle-aged man cupped his hands and smiled. The regent has arrived. The emperor has arrived. A sharp voice interrupted the middle-aged man's words. Yili smiled faintly and signaled him to talk later. The middle-aged man hurriedly put away his regretful expression and stood up to welcome the regent and the emperor. The little emperor wore a bright yellow dragon robe as he followed beside Mo Jingli. Speaking of which, Mo Suyun was almost a year older than Mo Xiaobao, but right now, Mo Suyun was probably half a head younger than Mo Xiaobao when Yili left Glass City a few months ago. He followed beside Mo Jingli in fear and trepidation. No matter how one looked at him, he didn't look like the ruler of a country. Instead, he looked like a pitiful child who was being abused. Ying walked beside Mo Jingli. Seeing the pitiful child, she wanted to reach out and give him a hand, but she didn't dare to because of Mo Jingli's expression. Greetings to the regent. Greetings, your majesty. According to the original rules, even if the regent was in power now, the emperor should be placed first. However, when the announcement was made previously, the regent was placed first. Among the people who attended the banquet, the court officials were already used to it. As for the wealthy merchants who were invited, a large portion of them didn't realize this problem at all. There was also a portion that went with the flow because they didn't dare to offend Prince Li. You may rise. Mo Jingli looked down at everyone from high above. He walked to the main seat in the hall and sat down before opening his mouth to speak. Thank you, Regent, everyone said in unison. Ying also sat down on the right side of Mo Jingli. The little emperor Mo Suyun carefully glanced at Mo Jingli before walking to the empty seat on the left side and sitting down. The people below looked at the little emperor's timid appearance and secretly shook their heads in their hearts. Mo Jingli looked at the guests and courtiers below with satisfaction. He smiled and said, everyone, don't be restrained. Just eat and drink to your heart's content. Everyone wrote their thanks to the regent again. Everyone present had a few sources of information. Naturally, they knew what the regent wanted to do by holding this banquet today. Especially those wealthy merchants who were forcibly invited. Their smiles were all stiff. How could they still be in the mood to eat and drink? The atmosphere of the banquet was obviously a little strange. Yili didn't care about it. Her expression was calm as she ate and drank lightly, as if she didn't know the purpose of this banquet at all. In the hall, Mo Jingli looked down from high above. Naturally, he saw everyone's expressions. These few days, Mo Jingli's mood had been very bad. When Dongfang Yu disappeared, although Mo Jingli often wanted to strangle that woman Dongfang Yu to death, when she really disappeared suddenly, many things in Mo Jingli's hands became stagnant. There were many things in the boundless mountain that Dongfang Yu had always held tightly in her hands. Once she was gone, Mo Jingli couldn't mobilize that power at all. There was also the Empress Dowager who publicly fell out with him in the court. Although there was probably no one in Nanjing who didn't know that the relationship between mother and son was bad, but now that he had publicly imprisoned his birth mother, Mo Jingli was condemned by many scholars. At this time, looking at the stiff but obedient expressions of everyone in the hall, Mo Jingli suddenly felt much better. So what if these people opposed him in their hearts? On the surface, didn't they still have to obediently obey his orders and kneel respectfully in front of him? Come, bring him in. In the strange and heavy banquet, Mo Jingli's voice suddenly sounded. After a while, 2 guards of the palace dragged in a middle-aged man covered in wounds and forced him to kneel on the ground. Yili looked at him curiously. She didn't know this person. Master Lin next to her couldn't help but take a breath and whisper, "It's Zhang Baiwan." In the hall, there were many people who had the same expression as Master Lin. Living in Nanjing, as long as there were some famous people, most of them naturally knew each other. Of course, Zhang Baiwan's name was not really Zhang Baiwan. He was a famous grain merchant in Jiangnan. It was said that 60% of the grain stores in Jiangnan belonged to the Zhangs. In Nanjing, he could be regarded as one of the richest merchants. Wealth was not enough to describe him, so he was called Zhang Baiwan. Zhang Baiwan also had a nickname in Nanjing, Money Dead. He was already rich, but he usually dressed simply. Even his wife and children at home lived very simply, as if he was afraid that others would know that he was rich. He could take advantage of others, but if he let others take advantage of him, he wouldn't be able to eat for several days. How could such a person be willing to give Mo Jingli a large amount of money as soldiers' pay? Moreover, Mo Jingli's army was going to war, so they naturally needed grain. Before, Mo Jingli had already sent people to discuss with him, but this person avoided meeting. Today's banquet, he simply didn't attend. With Mo Jingli's temperament, how could he tolerate this kind of behavior that dared to challenge him? Therefore, at the regent's residence's banquet, Zhang Baiwan refused to enter the banquet with the invitation, but he was escorted in by others. Mo Jingli coldly glanced at the middle-aged man kneeling on the ground and sneered, "Lord Zhang, it's really hard to invite you." Zhang Baiwan had a bitter face and said in a trembling voice, "Prince, please forgive this humble one. This humble one doesn't dare. This humble one really doesn't feel well, so... Prince, please forgive this humble one. Doesn't feel well." Mo Jingli said, "Is that so? My residence has a few imperial physicians with good medical skills. Why don't you let them take your pulse? That way, you won't be left with any illness." "No. I don't dare." Zhang Baiwan's face turned pale, as if he really was sick. But how could he dare to let the Li Palace's people take his pulse? At this moment, even if he really had a terminal illness, the Li Palace's imperial physicians would still be very healthy after taking his pulse. Moreover, everyone knew that his unwell words were just an excuse. Chapter 907. Impudent. Mo Jingli's face darkened. He slammed his hand heavily on the armrest. The heavy sound made everyone's heart tremble. Zhang Baiwan's plump body trembled. His face was ashen from fright. "I gave you face and you didn't want it. Do you really think I am a pushover?" Mo Jingli said darkly. He waved his hand, "Drag him out for I and flog him 50 times. I believe that Lord Zhang's body will recover very quickly." 50 flogs. If he really flogged someone like Zhang Baiwan who didn't know martial arts and wasn't young, it would be enough for him to be buried. Even if the Li Palace was merciful, his life would most likely be cut by 70 to 80%. It was obvious that the Li Palace was planning to swallow the entire Zhang family. Everyone's heart trembled. They couldn't help but feel lucky that they didn't do anything stupid. The guards at the side didn't allow Zhang Baiwan to beg for mercy. They directly punished him and dragged him out. Not long after, the heavy sound of flogging and Zhang Baiwan's cries of pain came from outside the door. It was obvious that Mo Jingli wanted to kill the chicken to warn the monkeys. Prince Regent. Just as everyone was trembling in fear and struggling, a clear and low voice sounded in the hall. Everyone looked towards the source of the voice. They saw a young master dressed in white standing up. He said calmly, "The prince is about to go to war. There is no need to lower yourself to the level of an ignorant commoner. I ask the prince to reconsider." Mo Jingli raised an eyebrow. He looked at Yili with an indecipherable expression and said, "Young Master Chu wants to plead for mercy for him." Yili smiled and said, "This one is not pleading for Lord Zhang. It's just that, the prince's northern expedition is for the foundation of the Dechu state. If Zhang Baiwan is killed, I'm afraid it will affect the prince's reputation." Interesting. Mo Jingli's actions were meant to intimidate the crowd. He had no intention of taking Zhang Baiwan's life. At least, he had to keep him alive so that he could leave the Prince Regent's mansion. Hearing Yi Li's words, Mo Jingli raised his hand to signal the people around him to call for a halt. Not long after, Zhang Baiwan was dragged back and thrown to the ground. Although Yi Li begged for mercy, she still received more than 20 beatings. Her clothes were soaked with blood. Mo Jingli looked coldly at the person sprawled on the ground, unable to get up. He said to Yi Li, "My northern expedition was originally to recover the lost land of Dechu State. Now, I am only borrowing money from the people in the name of the court. This Zhang Baiwan has repeatedly refused. Does young Master Chu think that such a person should not be beaten?" Yi Li said indifferently, "Such a person naturally deserves to be beaten. However, killing without teaching is called abuse, and not abstinence is called violence. Everyone knows that Lord Zhang loves money as much as his life. It is inevitable that he would be muddle-headed for a moment. Now that he has learned his lesson, I believe that Lord Zhang will not disappoint the prince again." "Is that so?" Mo Jingli raised his eyebrows as he looked at Zhang Baiwan. Zhang Baiwan was able to accumulate tens of thousands of assets. He was definitely not an idiot. How could he not know that he had almost lost his life just now? If it wasn't for young Master Chu's pleading, Zhang Baiwan would have become a dead man. When he saw Mo Jingli's gaze sweep over, he nodded and said, "Young Master Chu is right. This humble one was muddle-headed. I beg the prince's forgiveness. This humble one is willing to donate 500,000 dan of grain to the army. The army was given for free. There was no need to return it." Although Mo Jingli had never planned on returning it, it sounded better than borrowing it. However, 500,000 dan of grain sounded like a lot. However, it was not even enough to feed hundreds of thousands of soldiers for a month. Naturally, Mo Jingli would not be satisfied. Zhang Baiwan's heart trembled. He said with a sullen face, 1 million dan. Mo Jingli snorted and said with a smile, "If that's the case, I still have to thank Lord Zhang for his righteous actions. In addition, I'm afraid that I will have to trouble Lord Zhang to gather the grain for the army later on. Of course, the imperial court will pay a high price for it. How about it?" What else could Zhang Baiwan do other than nod? He naturally knew that Mo Jingli's so-called high price was not something that he could hope for. Even if it was a fair price, he would not be able to get it. In the end, he would still have to pay for it. He was only afraid that after Prince Li finished the war, the Zhang family would still have some money left. With Zhang Baiwan's lesson, the wealthy merchants present were naturally more tactful. There was no need for Mo Jingli to say anything. They all began to donate money and goods. Most of them were even gifts. Although these people were probably cursing Mo Jingli's 8 generations of ancestors in their hearts, on the surface, they still had to carefully smile. They were afraid that if Immerse was angered, it would be difficult for them to even walk out of the Li Palace alive. After a while, Yili did a rough calculation in her heart. The people present had been forced to donate 5 to 6 million taels of silver. There were also countless other things. With such a rich income, Immerse's gloomy face became much better. Yili also very tactfully donated 50,000 taels of silver. Although Immerse was slightly dissatisfied, he also thought that Chu Junwei was away from home. 50,000 taels of silver was already a lot of face. Moreover, Chu Junwei's words just now could be considered as giving Immerse a way out. This caused Immerse to have a good impression of him. Thus, he did not say anything else. Of course, this 50,000 taels of silver was given by Master Lin, who was sitting next to Yili. Master Lin had lost 450,000 taels of silver in one banquet. His heart ached so much that his face was about to turn green. Everyone present knew that this money was like throwing meat buns at a dog. It was gone forever. Fortunately, Jiangnan had always been a land of wealth. Although these wealthy merchants had lost a lot, they could still bear it. If it was Nanzhao or Xiling, these people would have rebelled without waiting for Immerse's northern expedition. After getting what he wanted, Immerse was no longer in the mood to drink and eat with these people. After toasting a cup of wine, he stood up and left. Everyone present actually had a stomachache from eating, but no one dared to immediately stand up and leave. Prince Li had just left and you were already leaving. Weren't you clearly dissatisfied with Prince Li? Since ancient times, the idea that the poor should not fight with the rich, and the rich should not fight with the officials had long been deeply ingrained in people's bones. As long as it was not that they could not survive, ordinary commoners would not easily be willing to become enemies with the imperial court. Thus, everyone absent-mindedly looked at the singing and dancing in front of them while silently vomiting blood for the wealth they had lost. The most relaxed person present was probably Yili. Although Immerse had left, Yi Ying and the little emperor remained at the banquet. After all, it was the regent's residence's banquet. It could not be without a host. However, Yili's current attire was not suitable for her to talk to Yi Ying. Her gaze calmly swept past Yili, who was sitting in a daze in his chair. A faint smile appeared on Yili's lips. Why did the emperor appear at the regent's residence today? Yili asked curiously. Master Lin hurriedly explained in a low voice, I heard that the regent and the Empress Dowager had a falling out. He said that the Empress Dowager was soft-hearted and did not know how to teach the emperor. He planned to bring the emperor with him and teach him personally. Teach him personally. Immerse was actually planning to scare the little emperor to death. Furthermore, the Empress Dowager was soft-hearted. Immerse had probably forgotten that he was also taught by that soft-hearted woman. Chapter 908. That's right. Sigh. It's not easy to be born in the royal family. Old Master Lin looked at the dazed little emperor and shook his head. Even a fool could see that the little emperor was simply a puppet that could not be supported. When he faced Prince Li, he was frightened like a cicada in winter. Prince Li probably did not treat the little emperor well. It was better if he stayed in the royal palace with the Empress Dowager and Empress Dowager watching over him. Now that he was in the princely manor, who knew how long he could live? Yili lowered her head and thought for a while. She looked at Wei Lin behind her. Wei Lin went forward and bowed. Yili whispered a few words in Wei Lin's ear. Wei Lin nodded silently and returned to his original position. Old Master Lin looked curiously at the two guards behind Yili. He felt that this young Master Chu was more and more mysterious. Young Master Chu, Zhang Baiwan, who had just been beaten, came over with a pale face. He smiled and said, thank you young Master Chu for putting in a good word for me in front of the regent. Because Zhang Baiwan had just offended Imo Jingli, no one dared to say anything to him. And Zhang Baiwan did not have a good relationship with others. Otherwise, even if he was confused at that time, someone would have reminded him. Zhang Baiwan was most likely used as a pawn by these people. But the banquet was not over yet. Zhang Baiwan, who was injured, did not dare to leave. He sat alone in a corner and looked very miserable. At this time, he reluctantly came forward to thank Yili. Yili smiled and nodded. Lord Zhang, you don't have to be so polite. It was just a small matter. Zhang Baiwan smiled bitterly and said, young master's effort saved this old man's life. In the future, if young Master Chu needs anything, I will not refuse. Yili snickered. This Zhang Baiwan wasn't really muddle-headed. However, she didn't take his last sentence seriously. With Zhang Baiwan's money-loving personality, he wouldn't suddenly change just because of a beating. I wouldn't dare. Lord Zhang, you don't have to be so polite. Zhang Baiwan looked at Lord Lin beside him and said with a smile, if young Master Chu has the time, this old man will prepare a small banquet for young Master Chu. Yili pondered for a moment and said with a smile, if that's the case, I'll have to trouble Lord Zhang then. Seeing that Yili had agreed, Zhang Baiwan happily returned to his seat. Old Master Lin looked at Zhang Baiwan and couldn't help but laugh. I didn't expect this Zhang Baiwan to be so generous after being beaten up. I'm afraid that after so many years, young Master Chu is the first person who is fortunate enough to be treated by him willingly. Yili smiled faintly and said, Mr. Lin is joking. Old Master Lin shook his head and said, this Zhang Baiwan has never done anything without benefits. Young Master Chu should be careful. Yili nodded and thanked Old Master Lin for his reminder. Although Old Master Lin also had some other thoughts, he reminded her with good intentions in the end. In this world, there was no kindness without a reason. Zhang Baiwan was also considered a celebrity in Nanjing. Yili naturally had some understanding of him. It was true that he was grateful to her for saving his life, but she was afraid that he was more interested in the Chu family. Old Master Lin thought for a moment and looked at Yili with a smile. He whispered with a smile, I heard that Zhang Baiwan seems to have a young lady waiting to be betrothed. Although he didn't say the rest of the words, Yili already understood his meaning. In fact, after seeing Yili today, there were many people who had such thoughts. After all, although Chu Junwei was only a side branch of the Chu family, his background was not something that merchants like them, who were looked down upon by others, could compare to. Moreover, this young Master Chu was handsome and elegant. Even King Li seemed to treat this young master with respect. Needless to say, the Chu family and the Su family were inextricably linked in countless ways. Such a good son-in-law was naturally the object of everyone's desire. Even old Master Lin himself had such thoughts. It was a pity that he had 2 daughters. His elder daughter had already married a few years ago, while his younger daughter was not even 10 years old. He could only sigh and wring his wrists. Hearing old Master Lin's words, Yili couldn't help but be stunned and speechless. She really hadn't thought about this problem. After all, no matter how much she pretended to be a man, she was still a woman. No woman would think that someone would want to marry their daughter to her. But now, hearing old Master Lin's words, Yili turned to look at Zhuo Jing and Wei Lin. The two of them also had strange expressions. After a while, Wei Lin slowly said, Gongzi's style is outstanding, and his handsomeness is matchless. Naturally, he is the object of admiration of many parents. So Wang Yi not only had to guard against men, but also against women. Wei Lin and Zhuo Jing couldn't help but secretly sympathize with their prince. Yili shook her head helplessly and said with a smile, Thank you for your reminder, old Master Lin. This one understands. Old Master Lin chuckled. He covered his mouth and said in a low voice, "This one was just saying something for nothing. Originally, I said that I would rather tear down a temple than ruin a marriage. However, this daughter of Zhang Baiwan. Hee hee. Young master, please reconsider." In the opposite corner, Zhang Baiwan obviously noticed that old Master Lin might be talking about his family. He glared at him fiercely. Old Master Lin didn't mind and continued to drink his wine. Yili shook her head helplessly and raised her wine cup to Zhang Baiwan. Everyone present was surprised to see this. They didn't expect young Master Chu to see the stingy and miserly Zhang Baiwan in a different light. Chapter 909. On the morning of the second day, Yili received an invitation from the Zhang Fu as expected. An invitation for Master Chu Junwei to attend a banquet in the afternoon. Seeing the plain invitation, Yili couldn't help but shake her head and laugh inside. This Zhang Baiwan was really cunning. It hadn't even been a day and he probably hadn't even recovered from the wounds inflicted by Mo Jingli's people. Is Master going to attend the banquet? Wei Lin asked curiously. Yili put down the invitation and said with a smile, "Of course I'm going. Didn't you hear Master Lin say? This is the first time Zhang Baiwan has taken the initiative to invite. How can we not give face?" Wei Lin was non-committal. In any case, if Wang Fei was going, they just needed to follow and protect her. With Zhang Baiwan's abilities, he couldn't pose any danger to Wang Fei. Even if Zhang Baiwan really wanted to marry his daughter to Wang Fei, cough cough, Wang Fei couldn't marry him. "Master, Shiyard has woken up." As she spoke, the servant girl taking care of Princess Shixia came to report. Wei Lin said with slight shock, "She's very lucky, she actually managed to survive." It wasn't that Wei Lin disliked Princess Shixia and wanted her to die, but Princess Shixia's wounds really weren't light. The external wounds weren't fatal, but after the wounds became infected, Princess Shixia developed a high fever and didn't wake up. So many days had passed. Even the doctors in the Fu had given up. They could only take care of her since she hadn't died. Unexpectedly, when everyone had given up, she had woken up. The servant girl said with a strange expression, "But, that girl seems a bit strange." "Strange? What is it? Is she stupid, crazy, or has she lost her memories?" Wei Lin asked. The servant girl shook her head and said with a slight nod, "This probably, she's stupid. No, she probably has lost her memories." Yili stood and said, "Let's go take a look." When they came to Shiyard, they heard sobbing before they entered. However, the sobbing didn't sound like Princess Shixia's sobbing. Mainly, with Princess Shixia's age and personality, she definitely wouldn't cry so loudly. When they stepped in, they saw the mess in the room. Yili stood at the door and frowned as she looked at the woman hiding at the foot of the bed. Her eyes were clear and bright. She definitely didn't have the eyes of a lunatic or a fool. However, the expression on his face was indeed a little strange. Seeing them come in, the woman who was hiding at the foot of the bed and crying immediately stopped and stared at them vigilantly. Yili tried calling out, "Princess Shixia, are you feeling better?" Princess Shixia pursed her lips and suddenly threw herself at Yili. "Young master, be careful." Wei Lin was shocked, and he kicked the person who was pouncing over. "Wei Lin, don't." Yili hurriedly cried out. Wei Lin was taken aback and hurriedly withdrew some of his strength. However, he still sent Princess Shixia flying with a kick. But because he had held back 80 to 90% of his strength, he didn't fall too hard. Princess Shixia clearly didn't expect to be sent flying with a kick. She sat on the ground in a daze for a while before suddenly bursting into tears. "Woo-woo. Royal sister, bad people bullied Wei Lin stilled. He turned back to look at Yili and said, so she really is dumb. With Princess Xiao's personality, how could she act like this in front of outsiders? She really sat on the ground and started crying. Yili looked down and said, I feel that there is a difference between this and being dumb. Xia, do you recognize me? Xia was too focused on crying. When she heard Yili's words, she hiccuped and looked dazedly at Yili. She suddenly reached out to grab Yili's face. Brother, you are so beautiful. Yili raised his fan to block her hand. He looked at her with a smile and said, does Xia recognize brother? Princess Xia blinked in puzzlement. She bit her lip and shook her head. Who are you? I am the princess of Nanzhao. You are not allowed to bully me. I want to find my royal sister. Do you still remember your royal sister's name? Yili asked. Princess Xia rolled her eyes and gave her an expression that said you were dumb. She said proudly, of course my royal sister is Princess Anqi of Nanzhao. My royal sister is very powerful. If you dare to bully my royal sister, she will definitely have people beat you. Yili couldn't help but lower her head and laugh. I am good friends with your royal sister. But, how come I don't know that she has a younger sister? Nonsense. All of Nanzhao knows that this princess is Princess Xia. Princess Xia glared angrily. Yili nodded and said, all right, but I am not from Nanzhao. If you really are Princess Xia, I will send you back to see Princess Anqi. How old is Princess Xia this year? Why are you here? Princess Xia grabbed her hair and said with some distress, 7 years old. I don't know. My royal sister said that she would celebrate my birthday, woo-woo. Thinking of something, Princess Xia pouted and looked like she was about to cry again. Yili thought and asked, does Xia know Mo Jingli and Dongfang Yu? Then who is it? Princess Xia asked without much interest. Brother, are you going to send me home? I will have royal father and royal sister reward you heavily. Yili smiled faintly and said, it doesn't matter who it is. Xia, rest well first. When you are better, I will send you back. She pointed at the wounds on her body. Although they had healed a lot these days, they still hurt. Reminded by Yili, Princess Xia looked at the wounds on her body and wanted to cry again. After coaxing her with great difficulty, Yili let out a sigh of relief and took Wei Lin out. Wei Lin said with some confusion, what is going on with this Princess Xia? Is she pretending? Yili shook her head and said, Princess Xia's brain can't make such a perfect disguise. Just now, when I asked her if she knew Mo Jingli and Dongfang Yu, her eyes didn't change at all. If she is pretending. Princess Xia is too good at acting. That's true. Princess Xia had almost died at the hands of Dongfang Yu. She absolutely hated Dongfang Yu to the bone. Even if she was good at acting, it was impossible to not have any feelings. Send someone to watch over her. When we leave Jiangnan, send someone to send her back to Nanzhao. Yili said. Yes. Wei Lin nodded and said, young master, it's time to go to the Zhang mansion for the banquet. They had wasted a lot of time at Princess Xia's place. In the blink of an eye, it was already afternoon. Yili had to change her clothes and go out for the banquet. Zhang Baiwan really deserved the reputation of being the stingiest in Nanjing. The entire Zhang mansion looked simple and unadorned. Even the inside of the mansion was ordinary. If people didn't know, they would never think that this was the mansion of one of the richest merchants in Nanjing. The servants in the mansion were also like kittens. Looking at the housekeeper who was leading the way wearing old clothes with patches, Yili couldn't help but twitch her lips. Probably because Yi Li's expression was too explicit, the housekeeper embarrassedly pulled at his clothes and whispered, "Young master, you must be joking. In fact, we are usually not so rude. It's just that yesterday master, to prevent master from feeling uncomfortable, so..."